How? And basically, he doesn't really care. When did he ever fill up a gas tank or worry about a grocery bill? Kamala, she gets it. We need to make life more affordable for working people. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, it's not like she's been president, vice president. The felon
has no plans to lower costs for families. He doesn't know how.
He doesn't know.
Basically, he doesn't really care.
I know his intentions.
When did he ever fill up a gas tank or worry about a grocery bill?
This the hypocrisy is so stunning. I really couldn't find anything better to start today's show with, but that one I came across. Remember, everybody, the number one sign of loser think is reading people's minds, imputing intentions instead of assessing actions, and also being a raging hypocrite like Elizabeth Warren. You know, if I'm going to trust anybody to be efficient, it's going to be somebody who operates in real estate, and it's going to be someone who operates in real estate in New York, because you don't make money by wasting money via real estate. Good afternoon, everybody. How goes the battle? I'm sorry, we've now broken the seal of not doing 12:30 every day, because today I did the Unusual Suspects, and the time worked out that it cut in. And I wasn't at all going to make it for a 12:30 show, but you also don't want to not do the Unusual Suspects. I love that show. And I dare say, people, let me just get everything ready. It's a banger show tonight. It's going to be on at 6 o'clock. I talk about the Pavel Durov arrest and what we know. You know, it'll be nothing new for our crowd, but give it a watch, the Unusual Suspects at 6 o'clock. And it's going to be fantastic. Now, let me make sure here what I was going to do. I want to make sure that we are live across all of the various areas of the interwebs. Okay, good. So we're live on YouTube, or as I like to call it, CommieTube. Let's see if we're live on Free Speech Rumble, where we should be. And the best, most above average community on the world, vivabarneslaw.locals.com. Fantastic. We're live across everywhere. I'm in the good mic. I'm in a very good mic. Okay, before we get started, and I'm a little bit not out of breath, but it was a tight day. I had to run, drive to the studio, do the show, drive back, schedule for tomorrow. Ivan Raikland coming on, and we're going to talk about Jan 6, and we're going to go very much thoroughly into that. And look at this. Hold on. Check it out, people. We got Chewbacca, who just subscribed to our locals community. vivabarneslaw.locals.com, the best above average community out there. Now, I know that our guest is in the backdrop, and I hate doing the sponsors with a guest present. Every now and again it happens, but I prefer to be cool, calm, and not feel like someone's waiting in the back. Or not waiting back, waiting on stage while I do the ad reads. But before I even, thank our sponsors for the show today, I should direct everybody's attention to the most amazing above average merch out there on the interwebs. And we've got some new designs in, people. The banner thing, you put this on your front lawn, Viva Barnes, Viva, they're beautiful. They're beautiful. The mug, America, red, white, and blue, vivafrei.com for all of that. All right, you know where to go. And then we got some fun stuff with Kamala Harris. I came up with a good line today, that the fact that Kamala Harris has given fewer public interviews than Joe Biden means that Kamala Harris is dumber than Joe Biden is demented. Let that sink in, peeps. All right, today's show, talking about the Malaysian flight M370 that disappeared. There was some internet drama as relates to proposing theories, debunking theories, some wild video footage analysis, and you may or may not know of the gentleman Ashton Forbes, who's going to be the guest of the day. He's got some amazing theories. He's done a deep dive into this, has put forward a theory that many people call crazy, wacky conspiracy theory. He has analyzed the video. He has offered, I think, $100,000 to anybody who can debunk the video. So we'll see. He's coming on in a second. But first, by the way, speaking of no rumors, no conspiracy theories here, unless you think that Chuck Norris is not actually kicking as much ass as he is at the age of 84. Have you ever wondered what happened to the legendary Chuck Norris? I recently saw a video he made, shocked, but I already knew that Chuck Norris was still kicking ass well into his 80s. What's even more, he's got more energy, he's stronger, can work out longer, and has plenty of energy left over to play with his grandkids. He did this by making one change. He still says that he feels like he's in his 50s. His wife started doing it. She feels better too. Leaner, 10 years younger. I feel dirty complimenting Chuck Norris's wife. She has energy and it lasts all day long. Chuck made this special video, which explains everything. You can watch it by going to chuckdefense.com/Viva or by clicking the link in the description. Both the links for both of our sponsors are there. It'll change the way you think about your health. And by the way, I'll show you. I got the Chuck Norris stuff. It's fantastic. It's powder and it's got ashwagandha, a bunch of other great stuff. But I don't want to give away the secrets of the video. You got to go watch the video. chuckdefense.com/Viva. Link is in the description. Just a reminder. Chuck Norris is 84 years young, and he still has more energy than, I would say, 98% of Americans. He discovered he could create dramatic changes to his health simply by focusing on 3 things that sabotage our body as we age. Check it out, chuckdefense.com. It's in the link. And after you're done kicking ass, or I should say before you start kicking ass, when you wake up in the morning, you want to have a good cup of coffee. This is a Rumble partner brand. You all know it. I drink it. 1775. Everybody drinks coffee in the morning. It's an easy no-brainer. It's delicious coffee. It's a Rumble brand. 1775. Get straight to it. You love free speech? It's rare and endangered, and it's under attack. And by the way, the arrest of Pavel Durov is the evidence to that. Rumble is fighting to protect that right, and it's partnered up with 1775 because alignment. Everyone loves coffee and everyone wants good, ethically sourced coffee. How many cups of coffee do you drink a day? Most of you drink 1, 2. Rumble doesn't just slap their name on any random coffee. They went all out cross continents and found the best coffee on the planet, grown in the high altitudes of the Bolivian mountains, pesticide-free, hand-picked, packed with rich flavor that's usually reserved for the elite. It's now available to everybody. So don't give your money to woke corporations and chains. They don't like you. They don't like you. They'll take your money happily, but they don't like you. I'm not mentioning any names, but you all know who I'm talking about. Rumble teamed up with 1775. Go to 1775coffee.com. Use promo code VIVA, 15% off your first bag. Trust me, once you taste it, you'll never go back to the stale corporate sludge. It is delicious. It's fresh. It's not moldy. And it loves free speech as much as of all of us. All right. UFO nut in the crowd. See, I know when I see new names, and I think that this discussion is going to bring out people who may not be familiar with my channel. UFO Nut, I know that if I had ever seen that name, I would have remembered it. Ashton is 100% correct. We're going to see about this. All right, Ashton, is it for sale in Canada? Send Mom's Force. I think it is. I'm fairly certain it is. I'm 99% certain it is. Give it a try. But I'll check that as we get going here. All right, we're good. Ashton, if you can hear me in the backdrop, feel free to pop in anytime while I do one last bit of housekeeping here that nobody's going to know about. Bada bing, bada boom. All right, I hear you.
Hey, how's it going, Viva? Thanks for having me on, brother.
Dude, thank you. I mean, I've been following you online for a little bit. I've been seeing the discussions going on the internet. But we're going to get into all of this. I'm not going to delve too far into your childhood. I don't know how comfortable you are talking about all that. But for those who don't know who you are, 30,000-foot overview, and then I'm going to ask a few questions about childhood upbringing and how the heck you became the face of the most outrageous conspiracy theory about the Malaysian M37-370 flight.
MH370, yeah, Malaysian Airlines. Yeah, and I was never really like big into conspiracies or really the UFO community before this, but I saw these videos a little bit over a year ago. And I'm somebody who's worked in healthcare IT for 20 years. I do a lot of analytical work, a lot of work with databases that are out there. But I started to open my mind to maybe there is stuff that's out there that, we can't really explain too well. And started to look at videos, never saw anything very compelling till these videos came around. So I started to investigate them under a simple premise is what if they're actually real? Is it possible for them to be? And if so, what does that mean about what happened to the plane and the mystery around it, as well as the science and physics that we maybe currently don't understand that can fill some of the gaps of things like dark energy?
If we can backtrack just a tad, because everyone is going to say, what are your credentials? Stay in your lane. I mean, before we even get there, am I allowed asking how old you are and where you're from?
Yeah, sure. I live in Minnesota, in the Twin Cities, actually, and I am 41 years old. Just moved back a little over a year ago from California, escaping out there. So With respect to credentials, I would say that when it comes to science and physics, science is the study of observable reality. It is the scientific method. So I respect science a lot, and I think I've always been advocate for it in terms, especially physics. I enjoyed. With respect to my education background, I have been business and economics and what have you. But I think that and you can probably respect the word like expert doesn't really mean much anymore. And I would say that credentials don't mean much either. Everybody has the capability to, research, learn, find new information. And what I will tell you guys, I don't want anyone to believe anything that I say on this show related to these videos or what have you. Like if you follow the same path and you study the science from the beginning, and you read the scientific papers that I will be talking about here today, you're going to see that the stuff that I'm talking about with respect to quantum mechanics has already been figured out there by very reputable scientists who do have PhDs and what have you.
Did you say you went from California to Minnesota?
Yeah.
That's sort of like going, it's not quite from the fire to the frying pan or whichever way that expression goes, but you ended up in Minnesota. We're not talking politics today, but from what I understand, that place is almost as much of a steaming heck hole as California.
Yeah, it's like a small step up. I mean, I did escape California to get out of like the COVID stuff. I mean, truthfully, just opening it up, I started to wake up with respect to like COVID for me. And I think a lot of people's waking up point was that as well. And I don't like to talk too much about the politics, but there is a connection between some of the science that's suppressed and some stuff that happened during COVID, which is the propaganda apparatus, where they can convince the world of anything they want to convince the world of. And so what a lot of people will ask as we talk through the science of these videos and quantum mechanics is they'll say, well, if this is all true, then why hasn't it been done? How are they keeping it hidden? Turns out that's the easiest part. People will believe whatever the authority tells them to believe.
Okay. I guess, yeah, I won't pry further than that. It's very interesting. And this is a break away from politics. And I guess, Ashton, luckily we're on a slow news day so that no one's going to be in the chat saying, Viva, why aren't you talking about the failed assassination? I remember I had a guest on once, totally apolitical, and it was like a big news day, and I forget what the event was, and everyone's like, why are you? And yeah, we're lucky because we're going to have a bit of a respite to talk about this. So I guess, yeah, it doesn't matter. We'll get right into it. The Malaysia flight, for give us the overview of that, because some people might not have been paying any attention to this at the time. This is 10 years plus ago now, right?
Yeah, so this plane disappeared over 10 years ago. We just had the 10-year anniversary. That was back in March. So it was March 8th, 2014. And this plane, I'm actually trying to pull up a screen share here, which I think can help us.
Yep.
Can you guys see this? Okay.
Yeah, we can see it. Look at this.
Chris from the Not So Deep podcast set this up. This is a really good graphic if you're trying to understand the visuals. So you see this plane flying from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing, China. And then when it gets to this waypoint called Agari here, this is 61 minutes after the last communication. Good night, Malaysian Airlines Flight 370. Plane goes dark over here. Now, the reason why this flight path is important is that the days after this plane went missing, we had no idea what was going on. We were searching in the South China Sea here for this plane. Turns out it turned back. And we only found out like 5 days later when the Malaysian military admitted that they actually were tracking on military radar and that the plane didn't go completely dark. And it flies back towards Penang. Some people say it went back towards Langkawi, which is this island up here a little bit. But the point is it goes back to the nearest airport that can accommodate a Boeing 777 in an emergency scenario. And then it turns again. So what we're going to find here is there's like 3 major points. This point where it first goes dark here to the northeast. The place where it goes dark here, or it changes trajectory here over Penang, where it doesn't land. And then up here where you see this boat, this is the Nicobar Islands. Now, based on these satellite pings that we'll talk about in a minute, they've determined this plane kind of deviated up here past Indonesia, and then where this boat is, somewhere around this boat here, it turns south and flies into the South Indian Ocean. Now, so the reason why this point where this boat is important is there was a real witness on a boat who saw the plane, and she's basically been discredited, and she's in the agreed upon location here. And this point here is around 1840 UTC. Malaysia says we lost contact with the plane at 1822 UTC. It fell off military radar. But if you look at the day after the plane disappeared, all the news reports say Subang Air Traffic Control lost contact with the plane at 1840 UTC. which puts it right at this location where it supposedly made a sharp turn into the South Indian Ocean.
Let me ask you two questions first.
Go
So
ahead.
what was the information at 1721 UTC? Oh, you could leave that up for a second. Actually, might be useful.
Oh,
1721. What is the that's the where does it lose transmission and with whom at 1721?
Yeah, so at 1721 UTC, if you guys watch a lot of the YouTube videos that are out there, they'll basically say at 1721 UTC, this plane like goes dark, like it falls off of ACARS. So this means that from a civilian tracking perspective, it's no longer transmitting its information in its location.
Okay.
So
and then 40
right
minutes.
by
So it's
here.
40 minutes later, it's for the next 40 minutes, it's being tracked by the military. That's been disclosed,
Yep.
confirmed. How? I mean, like everybody's going to get so skeptical. They're to say,
Yeah,
how do
there's
I
two
even know?
sets of radars. So there's like a primary radar and there's a secondary radar. And so it only basically fell off of one of those two radars. And then if you were to like look it up on Flight Tracker, it's not there anymore. Plane's just gone. They don't know where it's at. But it's really suspicious because Malaysian military were tracking it. But that for days afterwards, they like were searching in the wrong spot intentionally because they knew the plane turned back over the continent or the peninsula of Malaysia, but they were still searching in the South China Sea. Wouldn't you think it's important if you had seen the plane fly out over here that you would say, hey guys, we're searching in the wrong area? And it turns out I found an interview with one of the search pilots, and he said they were actually searching over here in the Andaman Sea over to the west. And the whole world thought we were searching over in the South China Sea. And so you see this discrepancy between what's being told in the media and what's happening behind the scenes. And this is a pretty big red flag because what I'm going to be presenting here is that the United States government 100% must know what happened to this plane based on research into the surveillance apparatus that the U.S. military has. It's literally impossible for them not to know what happened to this plane. And then the second part is we're going to present this alternative event because if the plane didn't go into the South Indian Ocean, if what you see here on your screen is as much as we know up until the videos that we're going to look at here, then we need to be able to explain what's really happening here. If it's not a suicidal pilot or whatever nonsense people try to pass. Turns out there's almost 500 pounds of lithium-ion batteries on board this plane. And they're extremely dangerous. They've been banned from the cargo of passenger planes by the FAA, and I think internationally now as well, because several planes burnt up because of this type of situation, these batteries just suddenly igniting in the cargo bay. And if you look at the flight path, it actually perfectly fits with, well, if you're on fire, you're going to the nearest airport to try to land because you need, and this is a giant plane, so you need a pretty long runway as well. And this would be the right place to go to for that. And then if you look up UPS Flight 6, this was another, actually a cargo plane that had the same problem. I think it was 2 to 4 years earlier, where they had the lithium-ion batteries they were carrying burnt up. And the smoke was so deadly that the captain went just to get the oxygen mask behind his chair, and he passed out immediately. And so then the co-pilot, they tried to land the plane. You would think like you should be able to land a plane. I mean, if you have, 20, 30 minutes or an hour, but it turns out the smoke was occluding the cockpit window, so they couldn't see. So they ended up not being able to land, and they ended up crashing the plane, and both of those people died. I've speculated that as this plane, and this is actually supported by, you guys aren't going to believe this, 20 witnesses support a fire event. Right where this plane is at right now, Mike McKay's on an oil rig, and he sees an object on fire, a plane on fire for just a few seconds at the exact same time this plane went dark, which indicates he saw the batteries initially ignite and the fire suppression systems kick in automatically and they start putting it out. And now it's just a battle to get the plane on the ground before it burns up. And then there was also 9 witnesses along the coast. They all hear loud noises the same time Mike McKay sees the plane. The plane turns around and there's 8 witnesses on a boat. So 8 guys are sitting on a boat 10 miles off the coast of Thailand and Malaysia, and they see this plane flying really low. This has actually now been corroborated by some of the other expert investigators. They looked at the radar data, and they found out that the radar data indicates the plane did an emergency descent when it turns around. And this would be indicative of what you would do if you have a fire, because you have to actually depressurize the plane so that the smoke can pump out, but also so that you can get fresh air in. And in that situation, you need to be flying low because you need to give people enough oxygen to be able to breathe, like under 10,000 feet. And so this plane then gets seen by 8 people on a boat. There's one guy as well in the coast of this town called Kotabaru here, and he actually claims to see the plane on fire, but he thinks he sees it going the other direction. But it's around the right time. And then here we have the co-pilot's cell phone pings the Penang cell tower near Penang. So we know this plane flew directly over Penang and it had to be flying low. Had to be like 7,000 feet. And then over here, when we get towards our last thing, this boat, this is Catherine T. Catherine T is the star witness. Like, nobody can discredit her sighting. She was in the right location where this plane had to have gone right over her head. And she sees a glowing orange plane with no navigation lights flying low with smoke coming out of the back of it. And it's descending as well. So let me unshare screen. So she sees this plane descending. She sees it flying low. It's glowing orange because the halon 1301, this fire extinguishing gas they use to keep the batteries out, has bromine in it, which is a halogen gas. So you can imagine if they're battling this fire for an hour, they've got all this bromine chemical in the pitch black spewing this glowing orange mist around the plane. And basically, if you ask, like, how have people ignored these witnesses? The official bloggers and investigators of MH370 just said they must just all be making it up for fame or for whatever reason.
I got a few questions. Someone in the chat had asked it or alluded to it, but before we'll back it up all the way, it may or may not be relevant now, and we might come back to it afterwards. Who's on this plane?
Yeah, good question. And I see some people mentioning about Flight 6. Take a look into UPS Flight 6 because the situation is very similar. This plane was doomed, presumably. There are 20 Freescale semiconductor scientists on board this plane, which I don't think is a coincidence. And it's not just because, hey, there's scientists on board and there's way too many from one company. We're actually able to find a 2005 National Security Agency document on commercial emergence of superconductive microchips, which is what Freescale Semiconductors apparently was working on. And it said that it could be ready by like 2010 or 2012, I think, if the government, paid extra money for them. This company already had ties to U.S. aerospace and defense through serving their RF power needs. So they had just developed a brand new microprocessor as well. And 8 of these people were Chinese nationals, and they work for this American company. So to me, like, I try not to be too conspiratorial, but there has to be a motive for, like, why are we covering up this fire event related to this plane? And you immediately look at who's on the plane, and those people stick out like a sore thumb. We even mapped like where they're sitting. They're all next to each other.
They are, calling them important assets, not that other humans are not, but these are strategically, governmentally, informational, important assets on the plane.
Yeah. So I would say, yeah, they're pretty important. I mean, if you're looking at the government now, the one thing I want to point out too is that I don't think people realize how powerful microchips are and how important they are in every single thing that we do. But like, for just an example, the GPS that they use to autopilot the planes used to be a giant gyroscope that was like as big as this room, and now it's on a microchip that's like, the size of less than the size of my fingernail. So microchips in general are extremely powerful. And actually, if you look up semiconductors as well, the Biden administration has added additional tariffs to foreign semiconductors. We're actually in like a trade war with China over semiconductors, and this company was Freescale Semiconductors. And then when we achieve superconductivity, that's when we get what we call macroscopic quantum effects happening. That term is very important because when we imagine the idea of a wormhole, a lot of people now are on this idea of ER equals EPR, which is like a wormhole is equivalent to quantum entanglement. So we're actually trying to achieve quantum effects on visible macro scales. So to me, the Freescale semiconductor engineers have to be the motive for whatever this plane disappeared.
I'm going to Google ER equals EPR as a conjecture in physics, stating that 2 entangled particles, a so-called Einstein-Podolsky-Rosen or EPR pair, are connected by a wormhole, and is thought by some to be the basis for unifying general relativity and quantum mechanics into a theory of everything. Okay, look,
cool,
I read those words and I think I understood I understand the words. The conjecture was the conjecture resolution. Let me see here.
So yeah, Leonard Susskind and Juan Maldacena are the 2 people that have been promoting this idea the most since about 2013. And Juan Maldacena also writes papers about wormholes, and they're interesting because they present this idea that wormhole is humanly traversable, is that a wormhole is like a black hole without an event horizon. The event horizon is the area where light cannot escape anymore. So for a wormhole, it's going to look like a black hole, like the Don Lemon. Like you're making the joke about Don Lemon, but honestly,
I got the video on the I got the video on the backdrop.
He might actually be the most correct, although it's not really a black hole, because a black hole is actually very dangerous. And I think the type of technology that can lead to a wormhole can also produce a black hole. But the wormhole, if you are going through a wormhole, it's just like opening a door and walking through it. Like you're just now all of a sudden on the other side. So you don't feel like you don't get spaghettified. You don't feel the disruptive tidal forces.
Okay, so there's important science people on the plane. Why would there have been, did you say 500 tons of lithium?
500 pounds.
500 pounds.
Now, some people claimed it's 5,000 pounds, but we went through the weigh bills and everything and old reports. And those batteries were not revealed to the public until 2 weeks after the plane disappeared.
Were they there for commercial purposes? Or, I mean, it has to be commercial. Nobody's transporting 500
batteries
pounds.
Were Motorola. And nobody's really come forward to take, as far as I know in our research, nobody come forward to say, those are my batteries on the plane, because there's huge legal liability. But the reason why they're from Motorola is interesting is that Freescale Semiconductors broke off of Motorola in 2004 as well. And I talked to the guy that used to be a consultant for Motorola when they broke off. And he had mentioned that Motorola was already investigating superconductors before that, and he had speculated that those people must be the motive for what happened to the plane, because he knew how important the company is.
I'm going to bring this up because I want to make sure that people know that this is not unsubstantiated. The deadly cargo inside MH370, how exploding batteries could explain the mystery. How is it that there could be 500 pounds, which is not, it's not somebody bringing a drone. I've got my little Spark. It's got a 250 gram battery in it. How is it that there could be 500 pounds of lithium batteries on the plane and there be no definitive answer to why and for whom?
Yeah. And why did they cover it up to begin with? Because the moment, if they had said that there was this dangerous cargo day one, everybody would have been honing in on that as the reason. We didn't know how dangerous they were back then. I talked to Billy Vincent, who was former security director of the FAA. And I really just want to talk to him about fire event possibility, because you can actually find an article where even before the batteries were publicly revealed, he had speculated that it must be a fire event just from the flight path and everything that happened. It seems like it would be a fire event, much like UPS Flight 6. And it turns out there are batteries on the plane. I spoke to him, and he's very confident that it must have been a fire still with respect to this. I also found this one, Dr. Edel here. I think this is the Daily Beast article, possibly, or one of the others.
It's the Daily Beast.
Yeah, and Dr. Edel goes through the whole thing saying, like, fire event is exactly what makes the most sense in this situation. And this is how, when I talked about the brainwashing, like, we've been led, like, if you ask most people, they'll be like, oh, wasn't it like a suicidal pilot? Like, this is where the propaganda has taken over from just logic and reasoning. And the only reason why people don't believe it can be a fire, and if you ask some of these investigators, they go, well, the satellite pings indicate that the plane went into the South Indian Ocean. And so you realize that there's just one piece of evidence that would need to be misled or falsified in order to change the whole trajectory of the investigation. And that's the satellite pings.
But hold on, because we're getting into like conflicting. If it's just a lithium battery fire that sets the plane ablaze, this is occurring at, by the time it gets to over the Malaysian Peninsula, we're like 6 o'clock, 1800. Oh, no, UTC is Universal Time Constant. What time was it local time?
Yeah, so when I have to start converting, because I was thinking UTC in my mind.
I'm sorry, it was nighttime.
It was midnight. It's middle of the night.
Okay.
And it's like 1840 is 2:40, so 1640 is midnight-ish. So plane's taking off a little bit after midnight local time, and after the plane goes dark, there's 1 hour and 20 minutes. So the plane has to be on fire for 1 hour and 20 minutes. Some people will claim that the plane's going to melt within 5, 10, 15 minutes or something. From all the experts I've talked to, and I think I've spoken to at least 3 or 4, none of them claim that. The cargo bays are fire resistant. They've got these fire suppression devices. The bigger problem is that you can't keep the fire out, because these lithium ion battery fires, they have what's called thermal runaway, where it's just a cascading effect. Where
anybody who's watched YouTube videos of the people who smash them together and they explode and it's wild, and if you set them on fire and they spray fire, it's amazing in a scientific sense. But my question is this.
Yeah.
It's nighttime. I guess it's 1 o'clock in the morning, so it's really late. But if this plane is burning on fire, glowing at 7,000 feet, Malaysia's a massively densely populated area. You'd have more than 7 witnesses of a plane
Yeah,
on
some
fire in the
people saw
sky.
it, but the glowing aspect of it, I think it's more of like a haze. So it's not like a fire glow because I don't think the fire was actively spewing. If it was, it's in the cargo bay in the middle of the plane. But there were other witnesses. Actually, the hardest part is trying to find some of the other reports because I remember seeing other reports as well. But there's a bunch of people in Codabaro who see it as well. We have to keep in mind it's 2 a.m, so it's not like there's a bunch of people outside. Most people are asleep, and they're not going to see necessarily this plane flying over the top. But like I pointed out, just from pulling up old news reports, we found 20 different witnesses, and I think there's a couple more that people are like in Codabaro, but their report either doesn't quite line up with the time or usually it's just the time is what.
Yeah, so why? This is the personal question. Just why did you get involved in this or so involved in this?
I think that for me, the moment I realized that the videos are potentially real and the technology is real, then it was a matter of I just love science. So I wanted to figure out like, okay, well, how if we can actually manipulate gravity, and we'll show these videos here in a second, and do these things that we see here, then this is going to move our civilization up, like our entire civilization up a tier in the whole, what do they call it, the Kardashev scale or whatever it's called. Like we're talking the implications of what we're going to see in these videos, and it's all the same science in physics, is that we can have impulse drive, like Star Trek impulse drive, like, impulse us into the station, and without propellant whatsoever. We can have a warp drive where we can just bend space around us, like on a conveyor belt. Or we can actually just create a wormhole where we just, take your paper as a napkin in this case, right? Bend it up like this, puncture a hole right through it. Like Einstein's physics says we can do this. And the big issue is we need negative energy to be able to pull that off. So when I thought of this, I thought, okay, well, is there something we're missing that's out there related to this? It turns out there are.
Okay,
There's
now,
a lot.
And if we're going to entertain the idea of a lithium battery burning on the flight, like the other flight, Flight 6, if you know where it's gone roughly, although the search was in the wrong area, if there's witnesses that it was on fire in the sky, coming back across the peninsula and landing up wherever it was in that ocean, if it's a lithium fire, this plane is not dissolving into thin air. If it crashes on the water, presumably there's going to be evidence, floating seats, debris, more witnesses as it lands down, presumably some explosions. Any of that? I mean, sorry, that's a stupid question because I know they haven't found a trace of it, but
there was some reports of people claiming they saw an oil slick. I think one witness may have said something about seeing it crash, but there was a lot of misinformation about how the witnesses reported their sightings too. Like, for example, Mike McKay on the oil rig, he says he sees it on fire. That got reported on the media as saying he saw it crash, and they used that to discredit him. But then later on, he said, "I just saw it, on fire, and I didn't see it crash. Just saw the fire go out." Now, what I want to show you is this, which I think is going to be relevant because a lot of people are going to ask about, how can the United States know and what about the debris? These are the radars. This is actually from the Royal Aeronautical Society's 2019 report about the plane. These are all the radars that are in range. So the yellow line is the same flight path that I just showed you guys, which is pretty weird here because you would think that each one of these turns is a specific event associated to it.
The bottom line, for those who can't see the yellow, it looks like a paperclip or something. There's not one part of that flight path that is not covered by at least one,
exactly,
at maybe 5. Actually, if I can even cover these Venn diagrams, 1, 2, 3, 4. They look like there's 7 radars covering every pinpoint of that trajectory.
Yeah, and where it drops off from Malaysian radar here, there's still 5 more radars in range. And it's from 3 different countries. You've got Indonesia here, you've got Thailand here, and you've got India over here to the west. So this idea that like we don't know where the plane went is absurd. Like we've got 5 more radars. None of these countries are brought it up. If you actually Google this, you find out that they say, well, Malaysia just never reached out to these countries for their data. What? This is like the biggest avionics search in history. And you're telling me what? We just didn't reach out to the multiple countries. Apparently Indonesia claims their radars were just off. They've got like 3 radars in range. They were just all off that night.
Well, it's the Epstein cameras that working at the prison here. They're just none of them were on, and the ATC operators were sleeping.
And so then let me go to the next page here. So this one, and actually you can find a news article out there.
Sorry, Ashton. Let me stop you there just for 1 second. So the official narrative is there is no other footage, or there is no other radar data. Malaysia didn't ask for it, or some of them said we didn't have our radars turned on at the time, but there is no other radar data for the flight path of that flight.
Yeah, they just claim okay, that's where we lost it. And then we go based on these satellite pings, which I'll get to the satellite pings in just a second.
Okay.
So I'm going to go through the strongest evidence here, because this was actually posted on some mainstream news article thing saying, well, of course, we're going to eventually find debris. And the blue area is like around where it crashed down here. And then you can see that the currents, and I'm showing another image in a second, the currents flow to the east. They kind of flow up and around down here in this area of the world, in the South Indian Ocean. So, of course, where are we going to expect the debris to wash ashore? Australia, like all over the western coast of Australia, according to this drift analysis. Now, they did this drift analysis before they found the debris. So this was the one where they were going, okay, this is what we expect. And the red here is 2 years. So we wouldn't even expect it to get over here to, I think this is Tanzania or something like that over here. Guys, don't attack me for my lack of geography. Anyway, we wouldn't expect it to get anywhere near Africa in even 2 years. So where does the debris actually show up? Let's look at the debris map here. Well, look at this. 0 debris washes ashore in Australia. Let me see if I can.
Well, just for clear, 0 debris of the plane ever washed up. Some people in the chat are saying
never, not even 10 years later, nothing ever washed ashore in Australia.
And there was some rumor about a plane door, which apparently was subsequently determined it couldn't have been the plane door from this because it had barnacles on it, which would have taken longer to. Is that a correct?
So the flaperon is what washed ashore in the Reunion Islands, which is, I believe, one of these eastern dots here that may be hard to see. Them, we may be covering them up. I'm not sure how it's showing for the viewers, but in the bottom here is where we have our flaperon. And now the problem is the flaperon. I mean, this thing basically had to be beelining it to get to the location, because I just showed you the drift analysis here in the previous page. There's really no chance that they find this debris in about 1 year. All of it was found in under 2 years. And you look at this and you realize that in 2 years, it can't even get over there. Like, it can't drift that far. And so that's where you start to realize, like, immediately the moment the debris started showing up in Africa, people started wondering, like, hey, what's going on here? Something's not really adding up. And at this point, we had been searching down in the South Indian Ocean, and they found nothing down there. They didn't find any black boxes, which should be pinging and should be detectable.
Well, how long?
One piece of debris.
It should be pinging for the first 2 weeks. There's what's the life?
A month, and that's like at a minimum. That's what they like say, so then it should stop.
And what's the depth of the ocean in or around the Malaysian Peninsula?
I looked around here. It's not even that deep. Now, there might be some crevices that go pretty deep, but for the most part, I think some of the deeper parts were only like 6,000 feet. Now, I could be wrong, but something like that. So this is not some area. You're not in the Mariana Trench over here. This is not the deepest part of the ocean. And Ashton, the black boxes are 20,000 feet. They can be rated for. So
try something. Try to expand your image. People are asking me. Rumble Studios is working on being able to toggle around the screens. We can't do it yet. So that's how we do it. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. This will be better. We couldn't tag. Okay. So yeah. So here, this is where this debris was found, guys. So this debris here is in like the Reunion Island, and then there's even a piece here right above Viva's head here, where this piece over here is in South Africa. Like, it would take debris like 3 years to get there from this crash site, and this is this crash site down here.
But I mean, look, how are they not? If it's debris, first of all, if it's plane debris, there has to be another plane that crashed. I don't understand how they're not able to definitively track where this debris came from, serial numbers, or at the very least.
Because there's no unique serial numbers. So even this flaperon, the one that you were talking about, I think is the one that's the closest here, somewhere in these. This flaperon, they used a part number, and they said, well, this comes from the same type of plane that Malaysian Airlines, the MH370 was, down to like the sub level. So they're very confident based on using a partial part number search. Now, there was a unique serial plate on that flaperon that was mysteriously missing, even though it's like bolted on to the flaperon. And this is where the people, I'm actually believe this debris is from MH370. The thing is, when you look at the totality of it, it's not enough debris to even show a plane crashed. It's like 10 to 20 tiny pieces of debris. This is like if I found your finger and I said that, well, Viva must be dead. I found his finger, right? Like, it actually doesn't even prove a plane crashed. And the reason why this is important is that most of the conspiracy theories that are out there, some think that the plane was remote controlled or whatever, they all point to Diego Garcia. And if you look this place up, it's actually in a really good location for the debris to have come from. Now, look at the currents here relative to Diego Garcia. This is actually like a perfect match for these debris to be found within the time period. And so why is this important? Because if this plane somehow got to Diego Garcia and they ripped it to pieces, then you just throw a couple pieces in the ocean. And a couple people find a couple pieces. They don't find any bodies, no luggage, not one inflatable seat. Like there's 300 flotation devices on this plane, right? All the seats are flotation devices. They don't find one of them, not one. And then they search in this area. Again, this search area down here, this was the most expensive search in human history. They searched for 3 years straight, cost $200 million. They searched a 120,000 kilometer area, and they didn't find one thing, nothing. So shouldn't the logical conclusion be that we must have got something wrong? It couldn't have crashed down here. And then look at the debris and go, well, the debris couldn't even have got there. So
I'm just trying to think of a potential where the fire could have burned so intensely that by the time the plane, I don't know, it disintegrating in midair, so that all you have, it evaporates or disintegrates.
Yeah, and so this is the reason why also people don't like the fire scenario. They say that, well, a plane couldn't have got to the South Indian Ocean. And my conclusion is, well, it never went to the South Indian Ocean, which seems logical because when we looked at that overall map, and this is actually it again, there was 3 specific turns, right, on this map. The first turn was when the plane goes dark over here to the east somewhere. The second turn was when it gets to Penang, this WMKP in the middle here. And then the third turn is this red line that they've got here. This is what the satellite ping analysis says. Oh, no, that's the simulator path. So actually, this one here, this is just to show that people think there was a suicidal pilot because they think that he practiced on the simulator route.
Okay, I understand.
And it turns out that the practice on the simulator route was literally just MH150, which was another flight he was scheduled to fly. And then what they do is they just connected this random waypoint somewhere that's like completely somewhere else, and they tried to pretend like it was part of that path.
Well, also, if it's a suicidal, I mean, I guess when did the Egyptian airline crash where the pilot flew it into the ocean? That was after this? That might
The one I'm familiar with is Germanwings flight. I forget the number of it, but he like locked out the co-pilot is like why it's famous or whatever.
Yeah, that's right. That was son of a gun. That was 2002. Revenge drove pilot to crash plane. The co-pilot of Egypt. No, the one I'm is Egypt Air Flight 990, which crashed off New England in 1999, killing everybody. Deliberately crashed as an act of revenge. That's the one I was thinking of. That's 2002. Okay.
Yeah. But the other one, the Germanwings one, is 2015, which happened afterwards. But
if it were a suicide, but then again, if it's going to be, I don't know how you ask a rational question if it's sabotage. But why would the pilot, if it were sabotage, do that?
Yeah, and the thing is, the Germanwing situation, he crashed the plane in under 10 minutes after he locked the co-pilot out.
Oh, that's the guy. That's the guy who did the flight simulator to crash the plane. That was the young German guy. Just why do the U-turns and the crazy flight pattern if the purpose is to deliberately crash?
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. And they try to claim he's trying to avoid radar, but as we saw from the radars, that's not how you avoid radar at all. And if you were like a suicidal pilot, first of all, if you're trying to hide the plane, you would just fly east from the South China Sea, go to the Mariana Trench. You wouldn't like do this weird flyback. And then if you are, water doesn't put lithium-ion batteries out either. They really can't be put out. Like this plane was doomed because of these batteries. And it's just a question of like, they probably didn't want to land on the ground because the plane's going to explode from the fuel inside of it. So they'd probably decide to go for a water ditching. Like that's why they're flying low, flying to the ocean. Like, and they need like military, they need support because otherwise everybody's just going to drown the moment you hit the water, especially in the ocean. So that's my premise. And then here, this is the satellite data. This is actually the raw satellite data. It took a really long time for the public to get access to this. Actually, the raw telemetry data wasn't even in this format, but the format they delivered in for the first time was May 27th, 2014. So this is about 10 weeks after the plane goes missing. They finally give this data here. And that's important because that is 8 days after the first video was already published on the internet, like confirmed 100%.
What is this data exactly?
So this data is the satellite pings.
Okay.
So this is the satellite pinging down to the airplane, supposedly, according to Inmarsat. They waited a really long time to release it. And it doesn't like what they had to do here was they did this novel analysis based on these BTO offshoots or something like that. I don't even see them on this particular screenshots that I've got here. And they determined like this is how the time determines how far away the satellite was from the airplane, and we're going to try to determine its flight path there. Now, what was stuck out to me was I scrolled through this, and before you even get to this, you can see that it says 1840 over here in the left. I'll make it bigger. So this is that 1840 time where I said that the day the plane disappeared, this is the time they said they lost contact with the plane. After that, there's only 2 rows of data for every hour: 1941, 2041, 2141, 2241, and then 2313. The data starts to kick back up again. This is 6 hours. This is the whole duration where they try to argue. All this in green here is where they're trying to argue this plane was flying rogue in the South Indian Ocean from that turn point. Because 1840 is where it turned into the South Indian Ocean. The data is full and complete before 1840. And then you get down here, and it's just 10 rows of data. And I go, wait a minute, what? As a guy who works in databases as my real job, I guess my real expertise, I work in relational databases, which are basically just Excel spreadsheets connected to one another. And the moment I saw this, I was like, how did nobody notice this really unusual thing? So I started asking some of the OG investigators on Twitter. They all hate me or what have you. I started asking them, like, why is this data changed like this? And you know what the response is? Just to yell back at me and spurg out, like, it's normal. It's normal. It's normal, like an NPC just malfunctioning. And like, I couldn't even understand like how anyone could think this was normal. And then they try to claim, well, the system was turned off at like 1707. And I'm like, well, that doesn't explain why the data is full until 1840. That's an hour and 30 minutes.
So is that to say, though,
I haven't got any logical answer for how people haven't thought this is suspicious.
That is to say, when you scroll up, we see it here, 1840, 56, 1840. We're getting a ping on a radar basically every second.
Oh, so this isn't a good representation of that. I do have another one because I just, it's so long to scroll through it all that I generally just show the abbreviated version. But I can actually show the sketchy data, as I call it, because I have a video recording of it as well. Actually, I don't know where it is. I may have to look around for that actually. But yeah, just you guys can pull it up yourselves as well. You can find it on Victor Illanella's blog. But this goes for hundreds and hundreds of rows, hundreds and hundreds of rows for the first hour and a half of the plane flight. And then when it gets to this point here, it just, that's it. That's all we really get. So it's, you know, the way I've looked at this investigation in general is I try to treat it like a criminal investigation where I'm trying to get all the information and all the evidence and pull it all in and then try to determine what has credibility and what doesn't have credibility. And I've got 20 witnesses, and we're going to look at 2 videos in a minute as well that corroborate what the witnesses were seeing. And then we've also got like another news report from a China Times source that claims that the plane, that they have an intercepted communication from the Navy, that the Chinese embassy, the Chinese intercepted this communication, says the plane was attempting an emergency landing and disintegrating. And you go, well, wait, that's consistent with the fire event. That's consistent with that flight path, maybe trying to ditch in the ocean. And then Catherine T's sighting as well. Saw the plane flying low, potentially on fire, glowing orange. And in around the same time that the disintegration was supposedly 2:43 a.m., within 3 minutes of Catherine T's sighting. So seems like a lot of sources of corroboration for me. And this is the reason why, despite the absolute remarkable situation with what we see in these videos, it's hard to dismiss because there's a real world story that what we're being fed doesn't make any sense. We didn't find any debris in the South Indian Ocean. Why do we keep thinking it's still down there? As opposed to looking back at the evidence that was ignored, like real people, videos, military videos that we've got.
What I'm having trouble accepting, I'm understanding that you're operating on the theory that this was a lithium battery burn that crashed the plane and it disintegrated, that there's not a trace of that plane left, even though they have, according to this theory and based on the evidence, a rough idea as to where it would have crashed.
No, my theory is that this plane was on fire. And when we see it at the point where Catherine T saw it, we're seeing the videos start up. And then maybe I should just share this video. So,
because people in the chat are like, get to the point. What do you think happened to the plane? No, yeah. we're hell no, not a question of teasing it. I just want to
work our way up here. So yeah. Let me work up with this then, because there's one more, because this gives you the big picture now. Now that you've seen the smaller picture of this plane turning back over here in the Indian Ocean, the Andaman Sea. By the way, there's Cope Tiger and Cobra Gold exercises happening in this area. So we've got United States assets that are in this area. And right here where this boat is, we can see Catherine T's recreation. There's the picture of the glowing orange plane. This is from her blog that she created. So you can see this very faint orange glow here. We think this plane is literally being teleported through a wormhole. And when I say teleportation, I'm not talking dematerializing and rematerializing it. I'm talking faster than light travel, like so fast that it's from here 1 second and it's over here the next second. And we'll talk about the physics related to that, but I just want to give you what I really think happened is that this plane goes over here to the west. And you're going to say, well, why over to the west if it can be anywhere? Well, the right-hand rule in electrical engineering would indicate that the direction of this plane that we're going to see in this video is backwards. And we see the plane going east. So that means it's going to go somewhere over here to the west. But also 20 witnesses, 15 to 20 witnesses, let's say, on a small island see the plane. They see the red and white stripe of the jumbo jet, Boeing 777. This is a tiny island, does not see jumbo jets. They see it flying low with steam coming out of the back of it. And they see it fly south towards Diego Garcia military base. I'll see if I can make this bigger for you guys. It might be covered up. So down here in the bottom left, oh yeah, you guys can kind of see it. Diego Garcia military base down here. Okay. And you can see the reports of the sighting. So you can judge for yourself. Big plane making a lot of noise, she says. She thought it was about 6:15 a.m. because it's around prayer time. Here's another kid that saw it. And actually, someone went out there and interviewed these people as well. Because a lot of people were just wondering what the story with this plane was. Like, how can this plane just disappear? So I think that there's two ways to look at it. Either we started the fire and this is some kind of operation because of those engineers. It's like covert espionage between China and the United States. Maybe they're taking that technology to China and they're not going to look back. Or it was accidental. The fire was accidental and this plane is doomed. And the moment they try to land in the ocean, it's all over. And they need those people on the plane. And we're trying to.
But then even if it's a crash as a result of lithium batteries, okay, and assume that lithium doesn't stop burning once it gets into the water, the cockpit, like portions of the front end of the plane where it would have to land in a way where the continued fire would then burn and disintegrate every last element of the plane. I mean, which I would have great difficulty accepting. And then you'd have no witnesses who would actually have seen it crash once it's already burning on fire in the sky, and no trace of it after that catastrophic disaster. So that's one theory.
I think that the plane landed somewhere. I think the question too we're about to see the craziest videos I think the world's ever seen here. Then the big question, we're going to see this endothermic event, some absorption of energy.
I just wish I was in the audience to see. All right, he's making a lot of sense, and now he's talking about the plane having gone through a wormhole, and he's crazy.
Well, that's the thing is that I don't pull my punches, man. I'm not trying to sit out here and sell people a story that's palatable. I'm just trying to tell you guys this is what the evidence leads to. And it's like, because people can get on board with the fire stuff and they can get on board with the United States government knowing about the plane. But there's more. I wish that was it. But here's the thing. If this plane crashed, like you're saying, it should be somewhere. There's got to be debris somewhere. There's nowhere to hide this.
And so from our locals community, Doc No says hitting the water at speed would shred it. Agreed. But planes, I mean, not that they crash all the time. They've always been found when they crash in the water. You see the flaming debris in the water. Stuff floats. I mean, it can't just dissolve every aspect of the plane. I'm trying to think of do we know where a black box is situated on the plane? Is it it's in the cockpit, right?
Yeah, somewhere in the front. Yeah.
Okay, so even if I'm trying to think of a way that the lithium burning 500 pounds could have maybe somehow burnt the black box and dissolved it as well. Okay, fine. So now people are going to think what they think of you. And I judge you not because, for goodness sake, like, can I talk about what we talked about when we spoke over the phone? Yeah. You say, like, I noticed you seemed a little apprehensive that I'm going to judge you. And it's like, what's your view on UFOs? I'm like, if you told somebody who was not familiar with how babies are made, they would think you're making up some sort of crazy science fiction, unbelievable. Yeah, a little seed goes in and a baby grows in your belly. I've discussed this on the channel many times. Like, reality is, in a way, more unbelievable than science fiction. And then you get some of the smartest people on Earth who posit certain theories, black hole theories, etc., where they were just theories until we actually knew that they existed or found relative definitive evidence that they exist. And the stuff of Event Horizon, nightmare sci-fi movies become confirmed reality to some extent. So I don't think you're crazy at all, period. And I'm loving hearing it. So I mean, now let's start seeing some video, because this is where it's going to get interesting.
Let me, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do the science first. I want to try something a little bit new, because yes, obviously people think like this is wild. I thought it was crazy as well. But then you start to talk to people like Salvatore Paez, who's got these patents out there, and he is adamantly defending them. And they explain everything we're going to see in these videos. And if you dig through the quantum mechanics, guys, I'm just going to run through this concepts really quickly for everybody. We can come back to them as well. Is that standard mainstream physics thinks that the vacuum has nothing to give. There's no energy out there to give. But quantum mechanics says that the vacuum energy must be way higher than what we see when we're looking out there. This is how we use also dark energy. 95% of what's out there we say is dark energy or dark matter. Well, what if it's so simple? What if it's just that there is all this energy out there and we're in an ocean of it? And not there's nothing there. There's this equilibrium, and we're at this equilibrium here of energy. And we can reduce that energy state or we can increase it. Casimir came along and said, I'm going to put two plates together. And these actually shield out certain wavelengths. And what does this mean? That when the plates are really close together, there's this pressure that happens, the Casimir effect. Casimir effect shows a negative energy pressure differential. So what happened was Sakharov came along, 1968, guy is developing hydrogen bombs for the Russians. And he says, what if gravity, this attraction, is just explained by 0-point energy? This field that we're in, we can just increase it or reduce it. And if we do that, we're going to feel a up or down or back or right, whatever force we want to feel. It turns out Puthoff comes along in 1989, Harold Puthoff, and he writes a paper that says it's actually consistent with general relativity. The math checks out. 0-point energy can explain gravity as just an induced effect, and that we can shield electromagnetic fields like in a Faraday cage, but we can't shield gravity because it's happening at these quantum scales. So standard physics says, yes, we know there's quantum fluctuations and there's this quantum foam that's out there. But other theorists would say Dirac, for example, there's a Dirac sea of energy. And that sea of energy, anything below the baseline is negative. Anything above it is positive. So we feel positive energy because all energy is just energy in general. Now, the Earth is also exerting this gravitational force because it's a giant ball of mass, which is also just energy, E equals mc squared. So what I'm presenting to you here is a hypothesis that's been proven in peer-reviewed scientific papers that says that maybe gravity is just explained by these 0-point energy fluctuations. So we can reduce them or we can increase them. And negative energy is just reducing it, just like with the Casimir effect like that. The reason why I wanted to go over that with you before we do this is that I want people to imagine this idea of negative energy in terms of just reducing, like the Casimir effect, putting two plates together. But we're not going to do it with plates. We're going to do it with like electric fields, charged fields. And we're going to make a negative energy zone. What would that do? Would that cause us to propel forward? Would that cause us to actually make a hole in space-time? So now I'm ready to watch the videos with you.
A negative energy versus positive energy.
Yeah, and this is the thing that people think, the misconception about negative energy is that people think it's some exotic purple or orange floaty substance. But if you look at the problem differently, the math indicates there must be negative energy. Well, then you graph it out on a scale. You realize 0 doesn't have to be the bottom. We can go into the negative numbers. So now imagine your 0 is not nothing. It's just an equilibrium. So we are in the ocean, but the ocean is fluid on the surface. And if we reduce the latent energy that's there, even when it seems like there's nothing, that we can create this pressure differential that we need, the Casimir effect, and we can yank ourselves forward. It turns out that all we need for warp drives and wormholes is negative energy. That's the missing link that we've been missing all along.
Say the first definition for negative energy I got was a non-physics spiritual negative energy, which I also believe is somewhat tangible. Physics negative energy. I'm going to see if AI can simplify this. A state where an object has less energy than empty space. It seems like that should be physically a paradox where if something exists, it's because it has energy. But I guess then if empty space has energy, it's still tangible. So something can have less space, less energy than empty space. It's a theoretical concept that's often discussed in the context of warp drives and wormholes. While negative energy is theoretically possible, it's a slippery concept and no one knows how to achieve. Okay, thanks, AI. Okay, I think I understand it. Let's see.
So that's the problem, though, is that mainstream physics is stuck now because we know there's this 95% of the universe is dark energy and dark matter, but we don't know what it is. And the reason why we need it is because we need to explain why the universe can expand faster than the speed of light during the Big Bang. And so now the answer is pretty straightforward. What is dark energy? It's negative energy. It's just the energy in our space-time, like the water in the ocean that we're living in. We're living inside a medium of energy. In fact, what is inertia? Like when I move, there's a resistance that I feel. And you would say, well, this friction of air. But even if you're in outer space, there's still inertia. Well, what if inertia is just explained by the 0-point energy field? We're walking through an energy field all the time. The resistance you feel is walking through that field. So we're always in the medium. Then the question is, well, what is real empty space? If you actually peel apart all the 0-point fluctuations from a certain area, maybe that's just negative energy. So then the problem becomes a little bit different. It's just a matter of how do we engineer the negative energy? From some of Hal Puthoff's work and stuff that he's collaborated on, the other scientist that I would throw out there is Eric Davis. Like I've honed in on these guys' papers. It's like if you're ever playing a game against somebody and they win every single time, this is kind of like, they're cheating or they know something, right? Like this is like Eric Davis and Hal Puthoff's papers. Like they're all just like right on the money. We're talking about the 0-point energy, explaining gravity, all the questions that people have in terms of it, laws of thermodynamics, everything. So Eric Davis has also been on this, talking about negative energy, how they can harness energy from the vacuum as well from this. And the main point that will be the point of contention between conventional physicists who want to try to come at me is they'll say that there's nothing to give. This is how we've been brainwashed into thinking the vacuum energy, the 0-point fluctuations, we know they're there. We just think, oh, it's much smaller. It's so small that we can't get anything out of it. But the Casimir effect proves it wrong. Casimir effect is like, we can literally just see it. When we put two plates next to each other, they come together, which shows that there must be more energy than what people are claiming. Now, it's harder to get people on board with there's this massive amount of energy. But Richard Feynman, he was on the Manhattan Project. Feynman said that there's enough energy in like a small coffee cup to boil all the Earth's oceans. So the idea here, the concept here is the Dirac sea, this huge sea of energy. We can dip into it. And if we dip into it, we're pulling that energy out. So which now makes negative energy it's just regular energy, but it's just in the quantum vacuum and it's below our perceptive level.
Casimir effect arising from the quantum theory of electromagnetic radiation in which the energy present in empty space might produce a tiny force between two objects. Okay. This effect was postulated in 1948, but let me. Jesus. This is I read Black Holes in the Universe back when I was in university, and like it breaks your mind to try to understand these things. The quantum theory of electromagnetic radiation in which energy present in empty space might produce a tiny force between two objects. Let me ask a stupid question. Maybe it's not. Is this the idea of why any matter would ever cling to itself to begin with in order to create gravity in the first place?
Yeah, because gravity now is just really an electrostatic effect based on charges. And what do we know about charges? Two same charges, positive charges, will repel, but opposite ones will attract as well. And this is very important because now I don't want to go as far, I'm just going to say it. You could say the universe is electrostatic in that sense, because gravity now, if you actually look at the equations for Coulomb's law for electrical charges compared to gravity, they're basically exactly the same. The equations are as well. So yes, this is really a unification theory, and I don't deserve any of the credit. I just named two physicists, Kaluza-Klein in 1926. Kaluza-Klein already had a theory that unified gravity and electromagnetism like this as well. So it's just, this is the part where I'm like, guys, we've been brainwashed. The scientists are all out there from 1926 to Sakharov, Puthoff, and then all the other supporting physicists who have done amazing work out there. The theories are all out there that show this stuff's possible. And it's just a matter of changing our perspective on like what is negative energy and the 0-point energy to realize like there's a sea for us to tap into.
Okay, now before you get into the video, let me just before I lose track of all of these, we've got it was night and dark. How would it look like a plane to the witnesses and not just a glow? Why would 8 people be on a boat at 2 a.m.? It was a fishing boat. That's from Boopsy.
Yeah, that one was around 1 a.m. when the first fishing boat saw. The second fishing boat, there was like 3 of them on the boat. And then why would it not just Why not just a glow? It was kind of just a glow. The way she explained it, I talked to the witness, Catherine T, personally. It was like a kind of like a hazy glow halo around the plane, which is why it seemed like consistent with gas to me, at least.
All right.
Denise
Santu says, I watched Aston on CanCon. Very interesting information. Would love you to interview CanCon. I should have. CanCon and I are connected on Twitter. So, Boops,
he's a good guy. He shouted me out on Tim Pool as well.
Oh, he's fantastic. How could the witnesses see the colors of the plane if it was dark outside, or even know if it was a plane?
Yeah, so you have to realize too, when you're on the ocean, it's like being in the country in the middle of nowhere. So you actually see a lot of illumination from the stars, and it actually does cause objects to kind of pop out, even in the pitch black night. And also, it was a perfect clear night that night. Southeast Asia has a lot of haze. I know because I lived out there, but it had just rained, so it's like that's the best viewing conditions.
Mm-hmm. And then we got Denise Antu says, David, just so you know, Brian. Oh, Brian is a huge fan of yours. Sorry, that's CanCon's real name, right? I asked who Brian was. I'll get to that. Okay, Denise Ann, I'll text you afterwards, or I'll text you. I'll DM you. I think I'll see if I can. Either way. All right.
Okay, we talked a little science. So now we're emotionally ready to see the videos. I also want to point out one more thing too, as well, because like I get it a lot, and some of my followers are sensitive about it. I'm not, but I don't think that aliens zap the plane. I know it's probably easier sell to say that for people. And if you're in the UFO community, some of these people are adamant aliens zap the plane. But when I'm an investigator, I don't add variables in until I need it to explain something. And everything I've found related to these videos in this case can be explained by human goals, interventions, means, even science that we've got out there. So until I get to that point, then where we can't be explained whatsoever, then I get to the point where maybe we can involve the idea of aliens. And truthfully, this is actually why I asked you the question before we got on, is that I don't care. Actually, I'm really agnostic when it comes to aliens. And I think there's this huge amount of options it could be. And I don't want to be presumptuous to say, oh, well, it's this thing over that thing. Because if you ask my true feelings, I think that AI probably already took over the world. And maybe we're just like in the Matrix at the moment. So, I just leave it open. I don't want to offend anybody out there.
And I think anybody who denies the possibility of extraterrestrial life, I mean, by the moment we went into outer space, there's extraterrestrial life out there. And the fact that 50% of the water on Earth came from meteorites, and water is the source of life, at the very least, low-level, unevolved life out there. But my goodness, it's infinite.
Yeah, I think life is everywhere, personally. Maybe not life like us, but I think that life is, out there everywhere, personally. So this is the satellite video. This is the highest quality one. There has been some dispute whether or not the original was stereoscopic, like side by side. And the first version we were able to find was, but it's not clear whether or not that was a conversion from YouTube from maybe this version. But anyway, this is the highest quality one. These are real clouds you're seeing in the background here. The people that think these videos are fake think these were stock effect clouds that were taken from a cloud picture website. But they actually do move. A lot of people are going to think they don't move. That's just because we're looking from so far away. And this is not an optical camera either. This is like an infrared camera that's rebuilding this image with a ground-based computer.
Satellite pointing down to the ocean from the sky, not ground up.
Yeah, and it gets more. Yeah, yes, and we're looking down. I forget. That's a lot of people don't even realize we're like looking down in this. This mouse that you see come over the screen right here, this cursor, this indicates we're looking at a Citrix session, like somebody's actually remote terminaled into a database. And this, I know this because my job has been basically doing stuff like this for my whole life. And almost every company uses Citrix that's out there. And this is important because this frame rate of this mouse, this cursor, is different than the background. And so it's like, this is a weird detail to add in, because also they're going to use this mouse with like a middle mouse button or something to move the screen around, which is something I've never seen in really any video ever before this, which indicates that they're looking at a much bigger field of view and they're just focusing it to keep the plane in focus. And actually there's a drone somewhere here that we're going to see that we don't see it in this either. So they're like cropping that out. Now, these clouds are they're cumulus clouds. You can look those up. They're very low altitude clouds. So this plane's flying very low. We don't know, we can't tell the exact height, but we can kind of tell based on the clouds, it must be flying pretty low. You can see the smoke coming out of the back of the plane too here, which this is too low for contrails to be forming. So really, this is why like people that don't think these videos are real, they won't even admit that that must be smoke coming out of the back of the plane, because it corroborates the story that we've been looking into related to the plane and the lithium-ion batteries.
What's the provenance of this video? Like who leaks it? Where does it come from?
Good question. Well, in the bottom left is covered up, and I don't have a good way to show you guys, but in the bottom left of this video, it says NROL 22. and there's coordinates. There's an X and Y axis for coordinates. We indicate a location on the ground. And we mapped it out because they actually move when the screen moves, like what you're seeing right now down here. And it indicates the Nicobar Islands, the same location Catherine T is, within like 100 miles or something like that of her location. Extremely close. And NRL 22 is the launch of USA 184. USA 184 spy satellite was the first satellite in the SBIRS system, space-based infrared surveillance system. When you find their video, the very first thing the Lockheed Martin announcer says is global persistent infrared surveillance. What do those words mean, right? Global persistent infrared surveillance. And you go, oh, is this our SBIRS system? Is that what we're looking at right here? Is it like a ground-based system of computers that they can log into and just pull up any location that we were tracking at the time? So in terms of the person who leaked this, we'll get to the name of the person who leaked this right after I show the videos. I've identified them as Lieutenant Commander Edward C. Lynn. He checks every box for having leaked these videos. But let's talk real quick about these orbs. So we see this orb coming.
Even before the orbs, it appears whether or not this is from the top down. That's a curve in either smoke or contrails coming off the plane.
Plane's turning to the left. This is actually how we're able to find out it's the Nicobar Islands, because in both videos, there's two perfectly in sync videos from completely different angles. The plane's turning to the left in both videos. So we can tell this plane's actually turning to the east based on the coordinate shifts. It's actually allowed us to graph it out. Oh, is that a cute dog?
He's not so cute. He's cute. He's cute. He's a piece of crap, and he's very annoying. He's a blind Westie.
I wish I could pick my dog up.
What do you have?
I've got a husky. She doesn't like being picked up, though. She's very does her own thing. Anyway, sorry. So the orbs, guys, the orbs. Okay, so these orbs. First orb is like locking into the plane. Right away when I saw this, I'm not thinking aliens. Why am I not thinking aliens? Because aliens aren't flying around this accurately. Like, this is a computer program or some kind of homing system that's being used here. The second orb locks into a triangle formation without there even being a third point to the triangle. It's already in a triangle formation. And the third orb shows up immediately after, which if I'm thinking, if this is a weapon system, the first orb is locking into the plane, and then the other two are just boom, boom, and they're in the perfect organization they need to be in. And the triangle formation is important because it's a 0-point system, which means the center is essentially canceling out. If you were to beam something at the center of mass of the center of these three orbs, you are creating a 0-point system where all the waves are going to cancel each other out. And that's important because if you're creating a singularity, that's exactly what you'd want to do. In fact, 3 is the minimum number of orbs you would need to be able to create a singularity. So it looks like they mapped this plane. They're like circling around it. And this is where it's like the detail of the circling is so perfect.
Well, it looks
to recreate this, but
well, it's bizarre because they're moving in a variety of directions as they're presumably moving forward at 600 miles an hour.
Yeah, it's not quite that fast because the plane's descending, but so it's more like 250 and it's also turning, at least for that point. But it's matching the speed of the plane as well. They come in at 3,000 miles an hour and they match the speed of the plane. And then they get into this orientation where they're in this vertical orientation, ring formation. And then you're going to see here the main event. Poof. Now, this zap illuminates the surroundings. It illuminates the entire environment. And it illuminates the clouds accurately as well. This cloud on the left gets illuminated correctly. These clouds that are in the forefront don't get as illuminated. So somebody either spent a ton of effort to get the lighting just perfect, or this is a real event. What we found out from digging into some of these wormhole papers that are out there, and I'm going to pull up the second video while I talk about this, is that what would happen is if you create a massive negative energy event, photons get released. Real photons from the virtual particle flux. What we're seeing there is we're seeing real photons get emitted from the zero energy, from the Dirac Sea, from the ocean of energy I call the ether that's out there. So this is actually a scientifically accurate wormhole based on Eric W. Davis's physics teleportation paper.
Stop it there. Stop it there.
Yeah, go ahead.
Or back it up. Sorry. Okay. There are trails behind the drone things.
Yes.
People are going to think I'm crazy for even entertaining this conversation. I don't care, and I'm not judging you, and there's no but. What is this? This is obviously not infrared, but this is what contrast.
Yeah.
So,
so this right here is a MQ-1C drone, we think, but we can't really tell because all the MQs have the same body shape that you see here. But this is a heat signature right where the brain of the drone is. The computer system of the drone is right there in this location. And you see this heat signature seeping through the side. You actually can see accurate shaking of the drone as well as it goes through the turbulence underneath the wake of the plane, which should be right about here. It shakes a little bit more right there.
But this
And when
video itself, this
Yeah.
is the same video as the one we saw before, but
completely different angle. This is the same plane, and you can actually, we've synced them up side by side, and you can't see any discernible difference between the two videos when you try to line them up.
okay.
Like,
Now, right now,
getting two completely different angles, but yes.
I mean, it looks like a DNA helix actually. But why would there? What is the black pattern behind those?
Oh, exactly. So let me switch over to the other one that shows it a little bit better, because you might be able to see it better from this. So this is just a color change version. We did manually edit this to change the color, but that's it. But look at the dark lines in front of the orbs. They're not behind the orbs. They're in front of them. They're pulling them forward. If you look very carefully, you can see that what's behind them is just the residual. They're actually, the dark lines are appearing in front of them. This is the negative energy that I was telling you about. And the reason why it's negative is because it's extremely cold. When you tap into the negative energy and tap into this Dirac C, it's a neg entropy event. So an entropy event is like heat dissipating out. In this case, you're pulling the energy out of a certain area, which cools it down. And that's why you see it all black. This is a thermal footage. So black is cold in this situation. So when you see those orbs traveling in front of it, what they're doing, the physics that I was just explaining to you, is that they are shielding out the 0 point energy in front of them. And they're creating an energy pressure differential, just like with the Casimir effect. And what happens if you remove the energy that's in front of you, the energy behind you is going to push you forward. So this is a subluminal warp drive. This is not faster than the speed of light. So subluminal is just lower than the speed of light, which can be any speed you want. And this is just them using gravity, manipulating gravity itself and space-time. And that's what it really looks like. Now, going back to the original here, and that's why it's hard to see that detail right here in this. But you can see the movement of the orbs much clearer. And the other thing that we see here, once we see it a little bit closer, is that we can tell that the operator's having a hard time tracking this. We found this is potentially a Westcam. I think it's called MX25 camera that they use. It's a multispectral camera that has infrared, optical, and color capabilities as well. So this is actually just one of the most advanced cameras that the military potentially has that's out there, at least in 2014. Look at the heat signature on this. How could anyone fake this? It turns out this is cold fusion. This is low energy nuclear reactions. This is a field here. We're not looking at like a metal ball. This is just like a magnetic field. Like you're seeing the barrier of where the magnetic field goes. And it's, creating a fusion situation where the particles kind of extend out and they kind of like an umbrella flow off and back in towards the center here. And this is where I spoke to Bob Greenier, who's an expert at low energy nuclear reactions. And when he saw this, he actually made a video about it before he knew me, because he saw this and he's like, holy crap, like that's theoretically what we would expect to be seeing in a cold fusion type situation, where the monopole is like somewhere off center right near the middle. And a monopole is just a magnetic field that's either going all inward or all outward. So you can imagine if there's like an all inward magnetic field, it's much like a black hole. Like they're creating like a very tiny, probably black hole where fusion is forming and happening here, and maybe even nuclear fission as well. So the orbs, then, the last thing you see is them converging. Now, if we remember Coulomb's law, as I brought up earlier today, which is also very similar to gravity, Coulomb's law is that if you have two, let's say, like charges, two pluses or two minuses, and I jam them together, you're going to get a repulsive force. The repulsive force is increased by the square, or the inversely proportionate to the square of the distance. So as the distance collapses between it, your force increases exponentially. So this is important because when we get to this part here where the orbs are converging, and this is all part of the original video, by the way, what you're seeing right here, this slow-mo as well. When the orbs are converging, what I imagine this is like magnets, trying to jam magnets together. And again, they're creating a 0 point. So your 0 point can be like this, but it can also be like this. So they're creating an extremely powerful magnetic flux at the center point of this plane. And when I spoke to Salvatore Paez, who's an active Navy engineer, who's got these patents that people think like are just beyond our comprehension, He says that you can achieve electromagnetic potentials, energy levels that are so high that you can actually break through the fabric of reality, like what we're seeing essentially right here. So I imagine that what we're looking at here, as crazy as this is, and I understand if people are skeptical, you deserve to be, is we're looking at an extremely highly powered ball of plasma right here, charged ball plasma. And they're superconductive. And why is superconductivity important is that it can create a cluster of like negative charges. And then on one side, you have your positive charges, which forms a circuit, like a battery, to begin to occur. And now this becomes like a self-sustaining ball of energy that can just float around. And if there's some kind of device inside there, well, now this is like a weapon. Like you can just deploy these orbs. You might be able to shoot them out of a cannon, and then they just fly around and you do whatever you want them to do. You have either AI or a supercomputer just be like, okay, lock into this plane. Here's the coordinates of it or the satellite data, and then they just do their own thing. And then the question here is, well, where does it go? I mean, you can see it disappear.
Well, I mean,
And
it's assuming anybody believes this video. I mean, what?
The hardest part is believing it, and I think this is the part where I'm honest with people. Like, don't take what I say. I'm not trying to be like a preacher here. I'm not trying to start a religion around this. I just want people to look at the science themselves. Nobody has told me this is the science that you should review and look at. I just followed the clues myself, and I found all the scientists I spoke about, and it turns out 0-point energy is the answer to everything we see in these videos.
Well, I'm going to bring it up, not to be critical. I mean, this is what I'm thinking. Like, how could anyone fake those 10 pixels? That's where his bias is pretty obvious. This is the question. And I was trying to find the best debunk of this video. This could, between the alternate realities of what happened, what you're explaining, or this is just a cartoon animation at, it's just a pure animation. How would you even prove? Like, what evidence would be required to prove to you that that's just an outright fabrication animation?
Yeah, so we had a $150,000 bounty. I think that you've brought that up before. It gets kind of misreported. It's kind of interesting how the stuff like a game of telephone. But the $150,000 bounty was for somebody to show up with the footage that they used to create this, their work to make this. Nobody's ever tried to get any credit for this. They showed up on a channel that had like 20 followers or something like that. And then it got spread around. Nobody's ever copyright striked it. So for me, I would need to have the hoaxer come forward with the actual footage at this point. I think another backup would be if they find the plane. But how about when they don't find the plane, because they've already searched twice in the South Indian Ocean, and they're planning a third search down there as well, and there's people claiming they know exactly where in the South Indian Ocean it crashed. At some point, I want people to wake up. I don't care how long it takes in terms of them doing it, but what you need, like the list of requirements to fake this footage, is not as simple as like, oh, it's just some color animation. There's two videos from two completely different perspectives that are in perfect synchronization with one another, which means you need a 3D rendered environment. Because you need to have that be in perfect sync.
Well, as you say that, because it's people do report it's $100,000 to disprove me, but no, it's $100,000 or 150, whatever. Show me how you did it, and then the question would be, who would not want to jump on that 150? Like someone who's so happy about it and proud. I'll answer my own question. The government. If the purpose of the government is to let people, I don't take this accusatorily at all in this full stop. They want to discredit people. They want to create people who promote theories that make them look crazy. Obviously, the government doesn't need $150,000. They'll never disclose how they did this fake, so that they can now say, look at all these crazy people putting out a crazy conspiracy theory about what happened to flight MH17. This is the type of disinformation we need to censor on the internet, whatever their agenda is, which is not monetarily based. That would be a more plausible explanation for why no one would come forward to show how they faked this video.
I think that's the only explanation that I would even begin to buy, because not only do you need to be a VFX expert that used a 3D rendered environment to get two different videos, you have to know about military surveillance. You also need to know about this science that wasn't even publicly available. Like the papers that I'm talking about were classified until like 2017. And this video is from 2014 that's out there. I think the government's the only people capable of it. The problem is they're implicating themselves. When you look at this video, especially the drone video, the person who's filming this knows what's about to happen. And that's a U.S. General Atomics drone. If I'm trying to, make a spoof video, I'm going to blame it on Russia or China. This is going to be like one of their, what is it, SIG Russian jets or something like that. Like, this is implicating the United States in knowing. And then the problem is, well, we went through all the evidence of the missing plane. There is clearly something we're not being told. The United States government clearly knows more about it.
Yeah, well, this is, we're still probably describing the same thing. Deliberately be opaque, deliberately be not transparent, so that people go, off with their ideas, so that they can then say whatever their agenda is. Someone in the chat said Corridor Crew did a debunk, and that's funny. That's the one I had in the backdrop that I was going to bring up.
So let me bring that up, because I don't mind addressing the debunks.
So I just want to watch this one more time. Just if you could pause it at every frame when there.
So this is the debunk that the Corridor Crew did. They claimed that this asset that was out there, that this was what somebody modified this and used it. So all I did, I just overlaid it over the actual thing. So that frame right here is the frame that the Corridor Crew falsified a fake comparison, and some other people did the same thing. What they did was they overlaid the real effect in the background over this asset, and then they blend it together. They changed the shading, and they claim that this means that it matches. But you can see from the middle here that it's nowhere near a match. The edges are somewhat similar.
Sorry. When you say asset, you're talking about the graphic that they use for the video.
What you see in the foreground is the graphic here, this colored graphic. The background, what you see in black, is the real video.
Okay, and what is this asset? Well, the asset. What is this clip that they're using? Is that a nuclear explosion, a neutron bomb, a blood cell? I mean, what would the fake be?
It's just something. It's from like the 90s. We found the guy that made it. It's called like Pyromania Shockwave Asset, but it's a real picture of a real like he lit something on fire, I think is what he did. Because it's not computer generated. It's actually like real images that were put together to create this effect.
Because their idea of the debunk is, we found the pre-recorded element and it existed for 20 years. Therefore, bada bing, bada bing.
But then if you ask people like, okay, who's the hoaxer? If you claim to have found these assets and you know where they're from, who's the hoaxer? How can you not find them? Like, some of these assets are extremely obscure, like really obscure. In the case of the cloud images, there's probably only one person, if anybody, that even bought the images over the 70-day window of time in which they had to make these videos. So to the point earlier, like when I look at this, the argument is literally that somebody changed all the pixels around in this to get it to match the background. Because you can tell,
it looks like two overlaid images. Okay. And
this is the only frame that's close. And this is why they only show you this frame. But when you take the full effect and try to match it, it's not even close.
And so can you go back to the original?
This is disinformation. Go ahead.
Go back to the original just so we can actually do
the original
by frame. How many frames per second are we at in this video?
I think it's 24.
Okay.
But yeah, and this will show it again in slow-mo here. And this one, the Zap here only has 4 frames, but the VFX they claim match has like 7 frames. So I guess they think that somebody just like deleted some extra frames out as well and then moved the ones around. So this is the real deal.
Pause it right there.
Okay.
Or if you could. I mean, it looks like a blood globule.
You can actually see the tail of the plane sticking out right here as well. Or like the inversion of where the plane was. I don't know what it is. And there's like a wing right here as well. It's hard to see in this version.
Yeah, no, I can see that. And now what's the next frame on this one?
And so then this is the next frame, and it's perfectly encapsulated. And so it takes about, like, this whole zap in real time is also less than like 0.1 or 0.2 seconds. And the idea here too, when it comes to the physics and the quantum physics, is like you're cracking through this energy level you've got. But the moment, like if you dip into the ocean, it's going to correct itself right away. You pull out a bucket of water, you're not going to lower the level of the ocean. And that's the idea of a wormhole too, is that you're cracking through it, and then the energy levels are going to immediately equalize right after. So you got to keep that wormhole open just long enough to get your object through it, and then poof, it's gone.
Would that itself not have produced a reaction? I imagine if it's I don't know if it's an explosion or not, if it's silent, if it's without reverb, I presume there could potentially be witnesses for that event.
Yeah, so this doesn't produce any explosions. Actually, what we see there's an endothermic event. So it's actually the exact opposite of an explosion. Explosion's a release of energy. That's actually an absorption of energy, which is why we see this negative energy type event occur. That's why it's all dark and black as opposed to white and hot. But there's also why we see this photonic release as well in the other video, because we're actually seeing real photons get pulled right out of the quantum vacuum that are out there. So to me, that debunk doesn't really hold a lot of water, although I know it's confused a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
What I would say out there is, okay, if you don't believe me, guys, just find the plane, right? And then find the plane somewhere in the South Indian Ocean. What am I going to be able to say? right? I can't say
Well,
much.
is it in fact true? I brought it up that Wunderbred said VX crews have been attempting to debunk this for over a year and have not been able to do it. I mean, someone should be able to exactly replicate it and show how they replicated it.
Yeah, and people have tried to make replications. The replications of the satellite video are, let's say, passable, but the orbs, nobody can get the orbs to move right. And then this is the problem too, is that nobody's even tried to make both videos, because the first thing that you'd have to tell, to be honest, you'd have to say, in order to make both these videos in perfect sync, I would use a 3D rendered environment. But in 2014, the software and hardware available for a full 3D rendered environment, it can take days to render a scene like that, if not longer. And the time frame is really narrow. At most, it's like 70 days. At the very most, like if you started the moment the plane disappeared. So that's the reason why people don't want to admit to the fully 3D rendered environment requirement. The drone video, no one's even come close. Even the Corridor crew, it was pretty embarrassing for them because they couldn't even recreate a few seconds of the drone video. And this is why it's like we see, like this is at nighttime. We're looking at a night vision cameras and night vision satellite imagery that's out there. You can see even the noise in the background, not just the camera shake, and the camera shake zooms in. There's just way too many small details. And so, yes, you would think somebody, if these were fake, people would be able to recreate them easily and show the reproduction steps. People can't even show the reproduction steps for getting the zap animation they claim matches to match. Nobody can give me a list of what the reproduction steps are on that.
So
ultimately,
everyone, it's too fantastical for anybody to take seriously. Let me just see if I got this spot here.
I don't know that this is warranted for what we saw personally. There's also some other things that are concerning.
Oh, there's a smoking gun.
This one's smoking gun is so
damning
smoky.
testimony? I want to see a smoky ass gun.
This is the smokiest gun. Someone tracked down the exact film grain.
They did it.
You want to talk exact match?
Those.
You want to talk?
Wow.
Wait, this might not be the right part.
Those heroes, incredible. I am so impressed.
Okay, I'm not sure if this is the right part. Forget it. No, it's just easier to. I mean, first of all, it's easier to believe. It's more plausible to everybody that it's just a fake. Okay, nobody's going to own up to it. Maybe the person who did it died, and they'll never be able to own up for it. Nobody else can replicate it. But okay, so
let me, because I agree with you, Viva, for sure. I mean, it's too much for most people to believe. Even my parents who support me, I think they can't even really believe it. I had a hard time believing it, but here's the answer. I found Edward C. Lin, the guy who leaked the videos. This guy went to prison for 9 years. He was working on a spy plane program that he gets assigned to in February of 2014. The investigation begins April 2nd, 2014. He was the right rank, exact right position to be able to see both videos. The defense argues the classified information questions available on the internet. The government was terrified of the case going to court because they were afraid they would have to show the classified information that he supposedly leaked that was out there. And they didn't want to have to do that. They ended up having to admit that they basically lied to the public about what the case was about. It wasn't even ever really a spy case. There was no evidence he was exchanging information with anyone from China that was out there. And he got caught with flight manifests that include search and rescue code names in May. So it's you look at this and you're like, how could he not be the guy? And this whole case has been shrouded in mystery, redacted. I FOIA about his case, and the NSA won't give me anything, to be kept secret in the interest of national defense or foreign policy. That's also what I got when I FOIA'd the plane. That's also what I got when I FOIA'd this fire suppression device that washes up in the Maldives. The NSA, I even FOIA'd the Regicide Anon YouTube channel that the video was published on. They said that the existence or non-existence could, jeopardize national security. So we can't confirm or deny whether or not they have any data on Regicide Anon, a random YouTube channel that posted the videos. If those videos are fake, wouldn't they just say we have nothing on it because that's just some fake videos? If they are, even if they are fake, wouldn't the government at least want to be who's faking military footage of our spy satellite surveillance of MH370? Go ahead.
I want to bring this one up. Taffy 4, you should be ashamed of yourself for promoting such rubbish. David, Taffy, you should be ashamed of yourself for thinking that discussion is bad. And if what Ashton is saying is such rubbish, well, it should be easily disprovable, and you should know that people think such rubbish. But you think I'm not ashamed for thinking conversation is the answer. You should be ashamed for thinking it's not. Bam. Okay.
Thank you. There's a lot of people like that though. But what I want to say to those people is like, what high horse are you standing on? Do people not realize that there is there's no official explanation for what happened to this plane? This isn't a Sandy Hook situation where a bunch of children were shot down and then, we are spreading dangerous conspiracy theories that hurt the families. These people have no closure. If you actually talk to the families, a lot of them are like, some of them have gone on to like CNN and said they think the plane was abducted. They don't. None of them believe this plane crashed.
Someone to that will say, well, that it's terrible to play with their hopes and expectations to promote these theories. But incidentally, like the Sandy Hook thing is a very sensitive topic. The only reason anybody entertains those conspiracy theories or is inclined to believe them is because there have been very terrible things in the past in terms of real manufacturing of things, crisis actors, real let it happen on purpose, real events that were used or conducted by the government for political purposes. The only reason anybody believed it is because of reality of what preceded it. So it's not, if these things didn't happen, people wouldn't be so inclined to think, look at a scene and call them white hats or whatever anyhow. So I mean, in as much as it's callous sometimes, in as much as there's some theories which I think are fundamentally untenable and disproven, the government has done much dirtier things than anybody has ever accused the government of having done by way of conspiracy theory. So
yeah, and I've tried to keep. I mean, there's way more evidence too. Like the phones were still ringing afterwards. Like this isn't just a matter of. Again, I don't pull any punches. So like, there's.
Stop there. Phones still ringing. If this plane got disintegrated from lithium batteries burning, what's the evidence on phones still ringing afterwards?
Yeah, and again, I think the plane got warped to a different location, and I think they were able to land this plane. Now, I think that everybody still died because I think the smoke from the lithium-ion batteries would have taken out all the passengers most likely.
But hold on, not to get a little. What? So you think this is a what does the lithium have to do with? Assume your theory that it's zapped or through a wormhole. What does the lithium batteries have to do with it? Just an accident within the event?
And I can't ordain, and I'm not psychic, so I don't know what the motivations of the United States government intel services were here. But again, it's either you're trying to save this plane, which I think most people are going to go, the government's not that altruistic, even if you have a VIP on board. Or it's a situation where this was an operation from the beginning. Like we had these 20 guys that were getting on. We probably knew they were defecting to China. Maybe they had microchips in the cargo bay, and whoever has this technology controls the world. My view is that's our technology. I've talked to engineers that have basically said, yeah, we got magic up and, hidden up in classified projects and black projects, and the world has no clue whatsoever. And they think that we're still worried about atomic bombs, but we figured out 0-point energy decades ago. And the world just has no idea. But the moment you have that technology, I mean, you look at what we're seeing there in those videos. If you can warp an aircraft like that, can you make a black hole? Like this technology is so powerful that you would do anything to stop adversaries getting access to it. And if those people had a component to this technology in their minds or in the plane somewhere, that's the motivation for the United States government to play this whole.
I'm curious as to, because your theory seems to it incorporates the plausible with the less than plausible, and then the question is, if they're trying to warp this plane, whatever. Why you would want to drop the lithium theory and just say, no, they just zapped this plane into a different existence?
No, that's the thing, because energy has to go somewhere. So I'm not trying to violate the first or second laws of thermodynamics. Energy is not created or destroyed, but if we're in an ocean of energy, we can borrow that energy and we can move that energy. If I squeeze one side, this side goes like this. So that energy, that plane has to go somewhere, in my opinion, which means that plane has to show up on the other side somewhere. I wish I could tell people, oh, it's just cloaking. We cloaked the plane, because that would be more palatable, or even say it was just annihilated. But I think I can't rule those out, but I would say it's like less than 1% chance. What we're seeing here is a situation, especially with the squeezing of the orbs, we're seeing the first ever wormhole there on video. And absolutely, like what is my goal then, right? Because I understand the uphill challenge that I'm facing is I just want to wake more people up. What I want to do more than anything is I want to inspire people who are younger to know that Star Trek level technology is possible, so that they study electrical engineering and physics, and not just the book learning stuff that we've been learned, but like actually the controversial scientists and physicists that are out there that get discredited, but their work is rock solid.
Well,
all the answers are out there.
They got the particle collider in where is it? Under the ground in Switzerland?
CERN, LHC. Let me tell you this, that we can do that and even better in just a laser. We can make high-powered lasers that are basically particle colliders, but much, much more powerful. Last year, the Nobel Prize went for attosecond laser. The reason why the timing is important is that the faster the time of your laser, the higher the frequency you can get. And the higher the frequency you can get, a lot of this is down to resonance. Like if you're pounding a hammer on a wall, you keep pounding, eventually, boom, you break right through the wall. There's a big element of resonance when it comes to like amplification of energy going all the way back to Tesla. So I got to ask yourself, why are these people with these attosecond lasers winning Nobel Prizes? There's a lot of other stuff that's out there. Is because these particle colliders, like it actually surprised me how they wouldn't be able to figure this out. My guess is they are figuring it out, and the government's just like anything related to 0 point energy, we suppress it, we teach that it can't be possible, and then we keep everybody in the dark about it. And I think that this UFO stuff that's been going on, I think they're also distracting from this technology. I think they want you talking about aliens. They want you talking about telepathic powers and psychic powers. What they don't want you talking about is our surveillance capabilities, and they don't want you talking about our weapons capabilities, like if we can do that. To your point earlier, there's surveillance stuff as well. Like when you have control over gravity waves, there's no hiding on this planet. We can like map the entire planet. You can shoot gravity waves down and potentially like the Dark Knight, like be able to like see 3D, like everything that's around you, go through solid objects. So, this technology that's what's classified. That's what they're hiding. And I think that any UFO personality you talk to, if they're not talking about the technology, you should be skeptical of what they're telling you.
Let me bring these up here. It says, Viva has already proven that touching an electric fence will cause you to jump. That's because I touched an electric fence and it shocked the hell out of me. Jammin13 says, this makes sense to me. Will's mom from our locals community says, the police chief in the US and Canada are preparing their forces to understand the history of UFOs. Click on the link and click on the link, then click on June 25, 2024, the report. That's majorcitieschiefs.com. And then we got, here, Rustanga's got another one here. For Viva's suggestion of aliens, CA, the American writer and scientist Isaac Asimov, also said, I believe in evidence. I believe in observation, measurement, and reasoning confirmed by independent observers. I'll believe anything, no matter how wild and ridiculous, if there's evidence for it. The wilder and more ridiculous something is, however, the firmer and more solid the evidence has to be.
That's a great quote. I love Isaac Asimov because that's how I look at it. It's like, I have no bias in what I present. Again, I just give it to you like, this is what the evidence says. As hard as it is to believe, that's what the evidence says. When I go through the science, it turns out the science is all there too, to explain it.
You said the guy's name was Edward Sealand?
Yeah, Edward C is his middle name, Lynn. Please look up his case, because after 2016, whenever he got sentenced, there's nothing about him on the internet anymore. Just completely gone off the internet.
Did he
and
die?
If he's the guy that leaked this video, then theoretically there's a world in which, at some point in the future, he comes in and admits it, and then boom, there's absolute proof. There's several ways to get absolute proof. I've also submitted this to the government, the AARO. They're the ones that investigate like supposedly anomalous stuff. And they get a bunch of stories from people that said they've been abducted and what have you. And I'm going, well, I've got military footage. And I talked to a guy, he says, yes, we can get the classifications to confirm if this footage is authentic or not. Well, they just started ghosting me. They came back and they said, paraphrasing here, they found something related to the US's search after the plane was lost from radar. Remember when Malaysia claims they lost contact with it? And that they wanted to know more about the genesis of the Regicide Anon account where the video was posted. That was back in April. It's now August 28th now, 4.5 months later, and they just stopped responding to me. They're just not talking to me.
Is Edward C. Lin? It's Lin. He's an Asian officer of the U.S. This guy here?
Taiwanese naturalized American. So he was a Taiwanese by birth. He was basically being fast-tracked. He was a congressional liaison in the years right before he got this assignment.
He's accused of espionage and patronizing a prostitute. They always got to go with sex when they want to discredit somebody.
No, exactly. Why were you're trying to put him in prison for life and you're adding a prostitution charge on there? Like, come on, that makes no sense.
This is new to me. Do his charges have to do with Malaysia or no? Totally separate.
They don't specify. That's the thing that's crazy about it. Is you can't find. There's nowhere where it says exactly what he leaked. And this is the part where it's like, if you look up other espionage cases, they're pretty clear. Like they were leaking satellite information and they were leaking this or that, but they can't say anything about his case.
And what was the connection that leads you to believe that he's the leaker?
The timing, he was assigned to the spy plane program the month before the plane disappears. And the spy plane program, at least I had one of my sources telling me that they have a deployment at Diego Garcia as well. The fact that his lawyer argued the classified information in questions available on the internet, his appeals point out to the fact that the classified information that he leaked could be video evidence. The people involved, they had to have people stand trial to testify as to why what he leaked was so damaging. He ended up taking a plea deal with the NCIS and FBI, and he still got 9 years just for classified information. Not the espionage, all the espionage spy stuff was dropped. Just classified information. There's people that get classified information leaks. They only get like a few months, little slaps on the wrist. He got 9 years. He also had prior existing relationship with the NCIS and potentially was like a spy for us, maybe against China in general. What I think happened, and this is speculative, of course, is that he saw those videos. He freaked out because, like you said, how do you get somebody to believe this? And he's like, holy shit, I'm looking at proof of, maybe he thought it was aliens too. Who knows? And then he leaks them to somebody, maybe somebody he trusts. He says, dude, you got to see this. This is crazy. And what do? They put them on the internet because they're like, this is too big. This is too big because this is the plane that disappeared, and we should have absolute proof from the satellite, from the coordinates in the satellite video. Like, how do you know that location before the telemetry data from the satellite ping was even publicly available? That location, you would have to have guessed the right location of the plane.
I'm just going to bring this up for a comedic relief. Met Asimov once. He was old, hitting on young girls, and a pompous ass. I was crushed for a while. Really black-pilled because before the weekend, he was my idol. Well, the old expression, never meet your idols. I don't know if that's a true anecdote, but it's from our locals community, so I'm inclined to believe it because we have a good crowd there. Okay, I'm sorry, and refresh my memory again. How do we know that video is at the location, what do they call them?
Yeah, the coordinates indicate the Nicobar Islands in the satellite video. And some people said, well, there's a bunch of bloggers that were all speculating as to different places the plane went. A lot of them just thought it flew directly over Indonesia, which would have made the most sense. But it wasn't until later on that we figured it went up past Indonesia and then back around. And that's within, I don't know, like 100 miles, or the Catherine T's locations within like 100 miles of those coordinates or something like that. Like way too close to be random chance. And if you're somebody who's hoaxing this, again, like I agree with you. If it is hoax, to me, the United States government's the only people who can pull it off. But that snare doesn't make any sense either. If they were to come out and admit it and be like, yeah, we hoaxed this video, sorry, haha, then the next question is, okay, well, what really happened to the plane? Like, because we know the United States knows. So to me, the only thing that the complete story makes sense is that United States was involved in disappearance of this plane. We were filming it for intelligence purposes because we want to know how our black hole wormhole technology works, and that we covered it up afterwards because there's no logical explanation we used. So we just say, went down to the South Indian Ocean in the middle of nowhere. Good luck.
If they were going to, first of all, if they were going to track it, why wouldn't they have better footage of it?
I think what we got there is pretty damn good. I mean, that's a satellite video feed that nobody even knows exists. And then we've got a Predator drone that's filming at extremely close range. I mean, that's the other thing where when I talked to Chris Leto, he said this looks like an operation because the drone's flying it's not safe. It's not safe to fly that close to the plane like that.
Who's Chris Leto?
He's this guy that does UFO like kind of video stuff, but he's a former Air Force, Navy. He's a former military member as well. Pretty respected in the UFO community as not being like, too far in the woo.
So it's funny because like people are listening and people they're gonna lose you or you're gonna lose them at a given point, and I know what that point is. Bottom line, looking in the wrong part of the sea for a long period of time, despite the Malaysian military knowing where the plane actually did not end up. They don't know where it did end up, but they know that it turned. So there's that element. The lithium batteries, 500 pounds, remains unexplained, unaccounted, or not unaccounted for, but there's no good explanation as to why that would have been there or not disclosed to the passengers, or at least I don't know. No one's explained why that was on the plane in the first place, from what I could see, even just by checking what you're saying in real time. A lot of intelligence Chinese researchers on the plane, and obviously the rest of it has never been found. No trace of it. No nothing. But there was with the CERN particle smasher, they were actually, legitimately concerned that it would create a black hole that could swallow up the Earth when they were getting it started. It's like, don't worry, the black hole is going to be microscopic and not big enough to swallow up the Earth. If anybody's watched Oppenheimer, whether or not it's it's pretty accurate, not totally accurate, but there were legitimate concerns that they could, as well, in the research for atomic energy, create a black hole that could destroy the universe. I mean, this is what the biggest brains of the time who created the technology were afraid of. So
they're right. And that's the thing. People should be listening to them. Now, the problem is CERN's not powerful enough. CERN is not powerful enough, but we can make ones that are powerful enough. And it doesn't require a giant CERN to pull it off either. We can do it with lasers. I'm very confident in that from learning about the low energy nuclear reactions. Because the moment you can tap in, the moment you say there's nothing in the vacuum, and this is why the misinformation or the suppression of the science starts at the 0 point energy. The moment you realize we're in an ocean that's filled with energy, logically you go, okay, if I can manipulate that, then there's unlimited energy to pull out of there. And then your mind can come up with whatever possibilities you want. The simplest one is you either create a black hole and wipe us all out, or you create a big bang and wipe us all out. It's kind of like equal and opposite. One is, sucking everything in. The other is a massive explosion. And I truly think that if they're hiding this technology, this is why they're doing it. And I actually don't even really disagree. If you tell a random person, say, hey, should we give everybody on Earth the ability to annihilate the entire planet at the push of a button? I think most people are going to say, probably not a good idea. Right?
I'm trying to see here. I'm looking up to see. This is National Geographic. The unsolved missions of 8 missing passenger flights. But I'm looking through quickly. Egypt Air, they recovered wreckage and found the footage. Malaysia, without a trace. I'm trying to see how many commercial airline flights have disappeared without a trace in the history of humankind. And I think
certainly not when we've had global persistent surveillance satellites. The closest one's going to be Air France 447. That one was in 2009, but they ended up finding the black boxes in under 2 years. So there's nothing like this. Like planes in 2014 can't disappear.
Yeah, now that you mention it,
they always find the black boxes too. So it's extremely weird that this plane disappeared. And this is the part where, if you're somebody who struggles to believe, if you don't want to believe in the orbs and what have you, that's fine. That's fine. At least believe in the fire event. Because I've shown you, we've looked at multiple experts who went into it. I also gave Billy Vincent's name, who was a former security director with the FAA. And because what's going to happen is if we find out that the fire event's the real thing, it's going to all cascade. The whole lie is going to start to unravel. Because the moment you start to realize, why are they lying about this fire event? It's just a normal event, Then you start to realize, well, the only reason it makes any sense must be something really secretive we had to cover up. In fact, just for a couple more points, and I have way more evidence I could go through, but the guy that said the plane went in the South Indian Ocean was the Prime Minister of Malaysia. He was the first one to announce it a few weeks later from talking to the Americans. He was indicted in the 1MDB scandal the very next year. He had stolen $700 million from this slush fund that's out there.
What's a few $100 million? Come on, Ashton.
That's just the biggest kleptocracy scandal in the history of the world. But then they go back to the former Prime Minister Mahathir. He was actually Prime Minister when I lived in Singapore when I was younger. And he immediately goes, it's not fair that the Malaysia is taking the brunt of this. The CIA knows what happened to this plane and they're not saying. So it's like there's so much evidence. In fact, the French father in the Netflix documentary, he was told by an intel source that the Americans know exactly what happened to this plane and that we had 2 AWACS, which are these spy planes, like the spy planes that Edward C. Lynn flies, in the area with the plane. So then you're going, okay, at the end of the day, for me, I'm like, if people just follow this massive amount of evidence that all points towards us, not Russia, not China kidnapping their own people, points to us doing it, we're gonna figure out that there's a conspiracy at play here. And just because there's conspiracies are possible doesn't mean that everything in the world is a conspiracy. Like, this is the part I want to help people with, because it makes it hard to discern the difference anymore. Because if you can do something like this, everything theoretically could be, but we have to always just follow the evidence wherever it leads us.
I want to bring this up because it's something of an insult, but also something of a compliment. What a coincidence. The guy who believes a wormhole ate a plane also just happens to believe in free energy and is trying to sell a perpetual motion machine. What are the chances? Well, in as much as I've known you and you've been on the show for 2 hours now, and we talked before, I didn't know you were selling anything. So if you're selling something, you're doing the worst possible job at it, because I didn't even know that are you selling a perpetual? I Googled it. I didn't see anything either. What's no. You get the reference?
Yeah, so what I will say right away is all the science is connected to one another. Once you look at the vacuum energy like this and you realize we have all this energy and there's nothing to give, this is why all these concepts come together. 0 point energy, can explain how we can create an EM drive, an impulse drive. It can explain warp drive. It explains the wormholes. And then the logical conclusion is just like we saw with those balls of coherent energy. Where's the energy coming from for these balls of energy that are floating around? It's coming from the 0 point. This is free energy. Free energy doesn't mean that it's just literally free. It means that like we can extract energy from the 0 point system and we can actually have perpetual motion machines. It doesn't actually violate the laws of thermodynamics. I literally will challenge any PhD physicist you want, anyone you want, your favorite one you want, Neil deGrasse Tyson. You want to talk to one of those celebrity guys, you want to have Eric Weinstein on, get him on with me. I'm happy to discuss it. We don't violate the first or second laws. That's like saying a windmill is violating the laws of thermodynamics because it needs wind. You're allowed to have outside inputs, a negative entropy system. In fact, what I usually tell people is, where do you even think energy comes from? Where do you think the energy from lights comes from?
No, but anybody says like perpetual motion is impossible. Am I wrong in understanding the universe is in perpetual motion? So at the very least, I mean, it's not the type of back and forth controlled motion that we're talking about, but perpetual motion.
You think of it as like a water table. I mean, it's like an energy table, you know? So when energy isn't just lost and all energy is coming from the, if you want to call it the ether, but you could argue that every single circuit is a negative resistor where energy is coming out of the local area. And there's even a Vertasium video that shows the energy is flowing through fields. It's not actually physically flowing through the wire. What this means is that, you know, this presents the idea that the energy itself comes through the medium that we're in, and that the wires are just conduits for, you know, how we want the fields to flow. So to answer your question, frankly, I do have a partnership with somebody where we have what we call an over unity device because it produces coefficient of performance greater than 1 that's out there. But I'm certainly not doing any of this to sell any of that. And it's certainly
not just that. Ashton, I didn't even mean the accusation in any degree of seriousness, because if you're selling something that doesn't work, it's not going to sell too good. And if you're trying to sell something, the best way, I don't know, that doing something that's wildly, what's the word? That many people are not going to believe is going to be the best way to do it. So this doesn't strike me as being an attention seeking for the purposes of making cheap sales that you get the one off and then you never have to deal with them again. And I don't even fault you for anything. People are allowed making a living and selling things, if, you know, period. So it was a time that was just being glib by bringing that up.
A lot of people think, well, like, what this guy is saying some pretty crazy stuff that's out there, and if this is possible, what does all this mean? And so, of course, I've had a lot of people come to me because there's a number of people that know the science is real, and they go, yeah, this means that we can achieve over unity and we can achieve free energy. But it's the issue is a lot more complicated than that, because people think that, oh, well, then you can just become a billionaire. But like I said, like, making the devices is not free. So this then becomes a situation like any other new energy, alternative energy product, which is like, how cheaply can you make something like this? And how much energy can it actually produce that's out there? Just like with making a windmill or something like that. So no, I don't take it personally at all, but I do want people to know when it comes to like, people throw the word grifter out, everybody gets it nowadays, but I've got to be on the bottom of the scale of this. I don't sell any books. I've never really profited related to anything related to MH370. I put my own time in, and at the end of the day, people deserve to, you know, make money, whatever they're doing out there. So I never really judge people.
When you get called Mossad, then you know that you've made it. And I'm sure that you've actually, it
hasn't happened yet. That's one of the things I haven't, Guy. I've been very careful to steer away from the let's say the Middle Eastern situation.
No, but this is intelligence. It'll happen, and it'll happen now, probably just as a gag because I made the joke. 2021 Patriot Fury says, if you ask me, it looks like they created a 50-ton BB that falls into the ocean, never to be seen again. And then here, this is just to support a little bit of give you a little bit more credibility. Not that you need it. What I mean to say is this supports the idea that they know more and they know something. 3 former military officials told Congress Wednesday, July 2023, that they believe the government knows much more. David Grush, a former U.S. intelligence official, told the panel that he is absolutely certain that the federal government is in possession of UAPs, citing interviews. He said, we got this. I mean, I listen to Rogan all the time, and we got this. There's no question the government knows, obviously.
Yeah, well, so this is David Grush, and so this is where, like, I don't mind criticizing these guys either. So, like, David Grush, Lou Elzondo's been making the rounds. He was on Joe Rogan recently as well. Joe Rogan famously, or not, semi-famously, like, canceled my interview with him because he had seen some of the debunk attempts that were out there, and he thought it might be a hoax as well, which I didn't even hold it against him. I told Joe Rogan to go talk to Hal Puthoff, which is one of the scientists that I've been talking about, who's been working in black projects for probably 50 years. Lou Elzondo told Joe Rogan, go talk to Hal Puthoff as well. Because again, like when it comes to the science, a lot of people want credentialism. Well, this guy's got, Hal Puthoff has all the credentialism, but these UFO guys like Lou Alzano, and he would say he's not a UFO guy either. David Grush probably would. They have security clearances. They have NDAs that they cannot speak about our weapon systems, and they can't speak about our surveillance. So when Joe Rogan asked Lou Alzano, like, why can't we see all these other videos that are out there? The reason why we can't see other videos are look at the MH370 videos. Look how much information a random guy can glean off of these videos, assuming they're real. This is why they don't show us anything. This is why they never show us satellite stuff, so that when we see a real video, we go, are we looking up or are we looking down? Because we have no basis for it. And this is the reason why I think that these people that are speaking to Congress are like, oh, well, we have the alien bodies are stored over here, or over there, or whatever, because everybody then is talking about alien bodies visiting us. But is anyone talking about super weapons? Is anyone talking about what kind of secret technology we have? No, they're not talking about any of that.
What does that look like if you get canceled from Rogan? So you had it booked and then he says, someone calls you up and says, no thanks anymore?
So the way it played out was kind of weird because we were like, you probably know the process. We were in the middle of booking the flight and all this. And then the producer who was doing that was like, oh, we have to cancel for some reason. And then I got the direct message from Joe being like, I looked into this and I think this is fake now. And I think he linked to me a Reddit post, which I've been permanently banned from Reddit now. And also a link to, I think it was the Danny Jones interview where the Corridor crew first had a clip at the end that they played related to it. And I just said, like, the truth is, man, for you and for everybody else that's out there, I don't really care if people believe it or not at this point. I'm just trying to wake up whoever's out there who's willing to be woken up by the information, because the passage of time is going to prove the science real and it's going to prove the videos real. And I just want to make sure there's nobody in the future who can claim, oh, yes, it turns out we do have 0-point energy and we can harness infinite energy and make wormholes, but those videos are still fake. Like, I'm just trying to prevent that type of situation, because I've talked to enough people, I've seen enough stuff, and I've read enough science myself to know, like, unless Eric Davis himself made those videos or the government did, like, nobody on this earth is faking that. And so, yeah, I'm just trying to set this up for the future. And, there are people out there that are open-minded enough and the people that understand the physics enough. And I'm hoping that when the day comes where we find out these videos are actually real, that we stole this plane, did whatever we did to it for whatever reasons we did, that people then look at, go, man, how are they able to lie to us for this long about this kind of technology that would change our whole planet overnight?
I think we not to get political, we now see how the government can lie and brainwash a slew of people into believing the insane. But here, it's difficult to believe that if Mr. Forbes' information on the disappearance of this plane threatened the U.S. Special Weapons Division, i.e. directed energy weapons, then they wouldn't have seized all pertinent evidence from him and his cohorts. You don't have anything that's not public.
Exactly. Everything that I'm doing is public information. They call it open source intelligence. So there's nothing for them to take. And this is why there's no way I can get charges against me either, because I'm just literally presenting public stuff. Now, I've had sources behind the scenes who've reached out to me, and I've interviewed some of these people on the podcast that I made for myself just to, like, wake people up. And then when I went through the science and the scientists that they told me about, I found out it was all legit. It's all been out there the whole time. Well,
maybe you get rebooked on Rogan. I mean, I would be interested in seeing someone who would like to not debate, but because I'm not in a position to contradict the science of what you're saying in real time. I know the limits of my knowledge, and I'm not capable of it. I'm sure someone out there who...
And I've been only learning for the last 9 months. So to perfectly honest, I have a long way to go, but I'm getting to the part where I'm confident now that I could hold my own with PhD physicists that are out there, because I've heard a lot of their arguments around why they think it's not possible and what have you. And I think I've done a good job presenting the main key counter arguments.
And look, if I failed at even allowing you to present it in a way that would allow someone else to contradict it, then I've failed, period. But that's fine.
Truthfully, what I would really love to happen if people are watching this, I think we have a lot of viewers, like, I would just wanted to avoid getting Terrence Howarded, which is like, if you were Terrence Howard.
Oh yeah, listen to that.
Everybody's like, oh, he got this wrong and that wrong and what have you. I would love for people to make clips and try to claim what I said was wrong here, because end of the day, the more attention we get to this, the faster it's going to be revealed. Like, the science is not an invention. The science is a discovery of nature, which means that we're not beholden to some timetable to figure it out. It just becomes a matter of us changing our perception of the universe, still consistent with physics as we know it, but just changing our perception slightly.
Well, I don't believe you're crazy, and I believe you're sincere, and I think it's quite clear that you're quite smart in as much as I can understand it. I just wouldn't be able to contradict you. with what someone else might. But now the information is out there, and if what you said is total rubbish, snip, clip, and contradict. And I'll just say, welcome to the channel, Stacy J28. And yes, we got 8,000 people watching. I'm rounding up, but we got about 8,000 people watching across platforms, and more people will watch this after it's no longer live because this was not my normal time schedule. I just was doing something. Oh, geez, 6 o'clock. Everybody, watch Unusual Suspects. Ashton, we're internet friends now, so we'll keep in touch. This was fantastic. I'm gonna go try to, after this, try to see what more I can explain to myself and understand. I know what I believe, and I don't think you're crazy. I would sooner believe it's all a big elaborate hoax set up by the government. The plane, I don't know where it disappeared without a trace. It seems to be the only commercial airline in modern history that disappeared without a trace. But I'm going to go digest some of this spiritually, psychologically.
No matter, as a closing thought, like whatever side anyone's on, I think everybody should be asking the U.S. government for a formal statement about these videos that at least pertain or claim to show military footage of a plane that is still missing today, and what our United States government knows about this missing plane. I think that no matter if you believe that the videos are fake, if you're somebody who's on the fence who thinks that we could have psyoped them or what have you, or if you think they're real, all three of this, we should align under that one goal. Because that's probably the quickest way to make me go away. Until then, I'm going to keep talking about it.
Well, and I would like to see you get on Rogan and maybe even have somebody, he's offered panels for Peter Hotez and for other people. Have the naysayer and the yaysayer come on and duke it out in real time. Ashton, stick around. We'll say our proper goodbyes. Everyone else out there, thank you all for being here. Tomorrow, 12:30 live, so it's going to happen at the regular time. And then Friday, Friday, I'm going to have someone who's going to talk about Pavel Durov's arrest, who has some Russian stuff. I don't want to drop a name unless I'm allowed to just yet, but it'll be good Friday, so stay tuned. Ashton, stick around. Everyone else out there, peace out. Enjoy the day. Peace be with you.